and we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as a family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham and I'm back. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Kevin O'Sullivan for sitting in for me. Cheers, Kev. Thank you very much indeed. But I'm back now. And so, hopefully, we won't be needing your services. We'll see you at 10 o'clock, 7 o'clock rather, as we normally would do. Theo Usher was with me this morning. Very good morning, Theo. I'd like to say I've gone away and the Labour government have come back absolutely punching with all the might that they have, absolutely firing all cylinders, completely won over the British public. And now we can move forward together with a new hope.
No. You have gone away, you have come back. And I tell you what, Nigel Farage is that bit closer, he's that bit
the
much
coming man
of a serious proposition after yesterday's performance.
And we're going to talk about it. This was his kind of State of the Union address, as it were, wasn't it?
So I can't say that everything is sweetness and light like you might want it to be.
No.
It's not, and I wouldn't expect it to be. I was at the Farage press conference yesterday, and it was
we got lots to talk
tour
about.
De force.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll get stuck into that. We'll also be looking at what on earth happened up in Liverpool. Obviously, this will be the first opportunity for me to talk about this. But my big question is, how is somebody able to get into a people carrier, follow an ambulance all the way down through the streets of Liverpool without being stopped? You know, people trying to chase ambulances is something that the police would stop you doing on any normal day, probably driving down any street in London or any street in Manchester, or usually any street in Liverpool. And yet, this character, who has now been arrested under a possible attempted murder accusation, and apparently possibly was high on drugs as well, nobody can understand how he got to where he got to and how he was able to get so close to running over so many people. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Also, the big story on the front page of the Times today, lots of pictures of King Charles in Canada, defending Canada apparently against Donald Trump. I think he should keep his nose out of that, but it's another story. Police safety fears over jail plan, it says on the front of the Times. How about this for an intro? So Keir Starmer's plan to release prisoners early could be of net detriment to public safety. There's a phrase that includes Sherlock, which I'm not going to say, but, you know, crime fighting in general. If you let some dangerous people out of jail, of course it's going to have a dangerous effect on the general public, because it's not a very good idea. We'll be talking about that, plus a whole load more. Why we should be having more kids, that's what Nigel Farage has to say. And HMRC are coming after your pension now as well. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Also, there's a weird story in The Sun this morning about some Pilates equipment, which people are apparently going mad for, and people are fighting over it in all Aldi stores. You know, what's going on in this country where people can't just go, all right, well, I'd quite like to get that, but if I can't get it, it's sold out, not a problem. They're actually fighting over these Pilates pieces of equipment.
I think it's called Reformer Pilates, mate. It's not my thing.
No, it's not something I've ever tried, to be honest, as you can probably tell. But anyway, welcome to the show. Very good morning to you. Good to be back. I suppose what we should talk about first up is the Liverpool situation, because still on the front page is very, very much. Liverpool parade suspect was drug driver tailgating ambulance. That's on the front of the Times, the Mail, and parade driver high on drugs. I mean, the big question I think for everybody today is going to be, how was he able to do the damage that he did? I mean, the Sun's got a really good graphic on page 3, how the Ford Galaxy ploughed through fans, and it starts up in Dale Street. I mean, I don't know Liverpool that well, but it looks like a decent distance, you know, from the top of what they call Dale Street down to the Strand and down to sort of the Liver building and all that. I mean, it looks like quite a long route, which would take 5 miles an hour, certainly. You would think a considerable amount of time, wouldn't you?
Yes, and he's obviously waited for the amount of, you know, for a little bit of space to open up so you can suddenly accelerate and plough into all these people. I don't understand, and what's also interesting, I've read elsewhere in the papers this morning, just before we came on air, that, you know, it wasn't just here where this driver, this maniac, got through, but cars were allowed really close to the route. Yeah, and we know how these lone, you know, these people act, and they can,
thankfully he wasn't a terrorist.
He wasn't a terrorist, but
imagine if there had been one.
But also if you look at it and they're saying he's high on drugs, it sounds really intentional. Right. It sounds like he's decided. You know, this isn't an accident. He's obviously he's not just being able to drive into the people, but there sounds to be like there's something behind it that he's.
But it could just be the fact that, you know, he's been drinking, he's on drugs, he hates the fact that he's stuck in traffic. You know, he decides, oh, there's an ambulance, I'll follow that, and that will get me out. And then at some point, I've seen footage of people sort of attacking the car because they're going, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be there. Yeah. But what are the police doing? Because surely there should be loads of police, and there seem to be loads of police on that route. Surely they should have been somehow stopping the car's progress.
Yeah, shouldn't they? He shouldn't have been allowed to have ever got to this point. And you'd hope, you know, maybe it's too early to say now, but you would hope that at some point somebody's head's going to roll for this.
You would like to think so.
But
let's have a look at Police Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims. This is her version of events as to how it all happened.
It is believed the driver of the Ford Galaxy car involved in this incident was able to follow an ambulance onto Water Street after the roadblock was temporarily lifted, so that the ambulance crew could attend to a member of the public who was having a suspected heart attack. There was no intelligence to suggest an incident of this nature would take place, and as we've previously stated, the incident is not being treated as terrorism. An extensive investigation into the precise circumstances of the incident is ongoing, and we continue to ask people not to speculate on the circumstances surrounding the incident and refrain from sharing distressing content online.
I mean, how are you going to stop people from speculating? Sorry, it's the police. Your job is to stop people driving into other people. Never mind stopping them speculating. How about you actually stop them driving cars into crowds of people? And to say that there was no intelligence, of course there wasn't any intelligence, because it wasn't a terrorist attack. Yeah. So therefore there wasn't any chatter on any kind of place where you would normally find it. Some guy goes and gets high and gets drunk and gets in a car and drives at some people. You're never going to know that's going to happen, but you should be prepared enough to say, if someone's driving into an area where there's a lot of people, why is he doing that? And why did nobody stop him?
And it just sounds really haphazard, like they've put this lorry in the way and then they move the lorry so the ambulance can get through. Use barricades. If you're going to have an event like this, make sure that you've got the proper barricades so you have somebody manning it. You don't have to move, because you can see it. If you have to move a lorry, then you've got to get...
And as annoying as it is, you know, they do this every year at the marathon, right? Nobody can drive down the street where people are running in the marathon because they've closed the streets off.
And you have one of those barricades, those metal, they're temporary barricades that you can open up, and there's a gate, and you have a police officer there, ambulance through, tick, and then we open it, and then who are you?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're high on cocaine or whatever it might be.
Get out of the car.
Get out of the car, and then no,
The end.
you know, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems obvious, and I know it's very easy for us to sit here, and I'm not being critical of the police overall, but what I'm saying is that it seems extraordinary that
planning, isn't it?
nobody did anything. You know, it says here, where are we, 6... I mean, it seems to have not taken very long, all of this, according to the graphic in the Mail, minute by minute, how the horror unfolded. A dark grey Ford Galaxy enters Dale Street, packed with fans, at 6 p.m. At 6:02, the vehicle makes its way along Dale Street to the confusion of fans, and a man who was reversed into throws an object which smashes the car's rear window. So already, before he's driven into anyone, there's a disturbance. Now, surely there were police there, and they can see somebody's had the back window smashed, surely somebody would have gone, what's going on here exactly?
Yeah, and I don't, you know, there was hundreds of police on duty for this.
I mean, it all took 5 minutes, which actually is quite a long time for something like that to happen.
Yeah, and I don't understand, like, why at the moment they moved that lorry and they let the ambulance through. Why they let this individual car through. Alternatively, you can say, well, let's just and we've seen these paramedics on motorbikes. Do the ambulance service really need to have, at that particular point in time, a full ambulance? Can they get a paramedic on, or I mean, they're very sophisticated.
Motorcycle. You know what I saw yesterday when I landed at Heathrow last night? I saw a guy on a bike, a push bike, cycling through Heathrow with ambulance written on him.
And they've got all the kit.
So he's got presumably the first responder. He can get there quickly. He's not on even. I mean, or somebody on a motorbike or a moped. Why is there an ambulance? I don't know. It's all. There's so many, as ever with these things as they happen. There's so many questions. Let's have a look at Detective Chief Superintendent Karen Jondrill on the arrest.
We have arrested a 53-year-old man from West Derby on suspicion of attempted murder, dangerous driving offences, and driving whilst unfit through drugs. He remains in custody where he is being interviewed. We have a total of 65 confirmed casualties, many of whom required hospital treatment, and our officers and family liaison officers are providing specialist support to a large number of these victims. And
obviously we hope that those, particularly some of the children that were injured, make a full recovery, but many of them are now out of hospital, which is one good thing at least. I mean, the other thing that I suppose we have to talk about is the speed with which the police issued the description of the man, which, according again to the Daily Mail, the police are praised for tackling far-right misinformation. I'm not sure that people are quite right on this, because it turns out that, yes, they did release the immaculate words that, it's a British 53-year-old man, white British. And Steve Rotherham, Liverpool's mayor, said they were absolutely right to release the driver's ethnicity, as he claimed nefarious groups have been trying to stir up speculation on social media. Well, again, the problem is they now have to do this for everyone, don't they? So every time the police are reporting an attack, they have to release the information, specific information about the gender, the race, and possibly any other details about whoever's done it.
There's also another thing. There's something else going on here, Mike, which I think is really important, is that there's a legitimate public interest.
Yeah.
It's not, they don't have to release these details because of speculation on social media, right? That's not why the public need to know.
Right.
People have concerns. They look at an incident. The first thing when I heard it, I saw it on my phone.
Yeah.
The first thing I thought when I thought, oh my God, a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought.
Because normally when cars drive into crowds, that's what it is. It happened in New Orleans, didn't it?
Yeah.
Over New Year. Happens in Germany on a regular basis. It has happened here in the past.
And as a member of the public, just set aside the fact that I'm on your show, or I'm a journalist or whatever, but as a member of the public, I want to know, is that a terrorist attack?
Yeah.
And so it is perfectly okay to release the ethnicity, the age, already released, and the nationality of the individual who has been arrested. That's okay. That's not going to prejudice a trial.
No, of course
it's not going to prejudice.
And we've been saying this ever since
investigation.
Southport, because Keir Starmer tried to make out that would prejudice a trial, which it wouldn't.
And it's not, that quote that you read from Steve Rotherham, and I don't know if it's part of a wider quote, if we're doing them a slight disservice, but that's not the reason. They haven't had their hand forced.
No.
This should always have happened.
Right.
And previously it did happen, and then it didn't happen with Southport.
Right.
There have been occasions where you can or what has happened previously, and certainly this happened when I was on the beat as a crime reporter.
Yeah.
This is going back 15 years. Is you would get whiff of who had been arrested, who they were, and then you would have somebody. And press officers in the police were pretty good at this. You ring them up and you go, right, I know it's this, and this. And they would tell you if you're on the money.
Yeah, exactly. They would at least lead you the right way,
So nobody ended up, getting it horribly wrong because it's a sensitive situation.
Yeah.
But it's okay, and it's not, you haven't had your hand forced, nobody's put your arm behind your back and twisted it. Just release the details because there's a legitimate... for all of those fans...
Apart from anything else, there are reasons why people might go, oh, I saw a 53-year-old guy getting into a Ford Galaxy, a white British guy, and I saw him coming out of a pub. Or there might be witnesses that could give you further information because you've identified the guy. If you don't say what the bloke looks like or who he is, nobody can do that. I mean, a similar question was raised yesterday. A story came out, you might have seen it, from North London, Hampstead Tube Station. 3 Jewish schoolboys attacked by what's described as men. Now, they haven't had their descriptions published. And several people have said, well, why are you not publishing their description? Because maybe we might have seen them. Maybe they might have been wearing clothes that we recognise. Maybe we might have seen them going into the station. We could have seen them, in a local coffee shop.
There'll be CCTV.
There will also be CCTV. Why are we not being told who they are? Perhaps there's an explanation because they're attacking Jewish people. They might be Muslims.
Yeah.
They might be. I don't know if they are. No. But, we need to know.
Yes, of course we need to know, and we need to bring them... And that attack is horrendous, by the way. Yeah. And we need to get, the police need a result.
One of the kids is in hospital.
Too often, when it's the Jewish community in this country, too often. We saw it where, they had that cavalcade of cars driving down with the Palestinian flags flying outside the window.
Down Finchley Road,
and the Home Secretary...
They weren't even charged.
But the Home Secretary literally had 2 hours of... the Jewish community on social media, making phone calls, saying, what are you doing? The Home Secretary has to ring the police to say, you need to go and sort this one out because it's not, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And they didn't even bring these in.
No, absolutely staggering, absolutely extraordinary stuff. We've got much more to do, much more to talk about. At 17 minutes past 6 here this morning, we're going to talk about Nigel Farage and his wish that more people in this country have more children. 17 minutes past 6.
If you can't feed them, don't breed them. That's all very well. And yes, I can see why people say that's not fair. But if you look at this policy as part of a broad range of policies, we do want to encourage people in this country to have children. And to do that, there's a whole range of things you have to do. Young people today look at the future. Many of them are saying we don't want children at all because we can't afford to leave home. We can't afford to get a house. We can't afford to do these things. All those things that my parents' generation and even I could see as my future are now just not possible.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well,
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 19 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way until 10 o'clock, of course, with Julie Hartley-Brewer's going to be here. Theo Usherwood's here as well. Glyn in Rotherham says the driver would have been shot dead in less than 100 yards if this happened in America. Give the police guns. Well, that's a very good point as well. Nice to have you back, Mike. The first priority of any government is to protect its citizens, says Brian. Releasing these dangerous prisoners is irresponsible. Starmer should just deport foreign prisoners. Well, he keeps telling us he's going to, doesn't he? I mean, this is another thing. This is a story on the front of the Times. Police safety fears over jail plan. This is the new recommendations from David Gork, isn't it? That, you know, we haven't got enough space in prisons, so I know what we should do. Just let a load of people out. And we still don't really know exactly who these people are going to be, how they're going to qualify to be released. But apparently now, the heads of the Metropolitan Police, the MI5 and the National Crime Agency have said it could be a net detriment to public safety.
I mean, they could,
You think?
Yeah, you wouldn't...
Really?
Yeah, and they've also questioned whether they're going to be able to keep order on the streets of the streets if they don't get the money they need. We have to ensure that out of court does not mean out of justice, and out of prison does not mean out of control. Yeah,
it's the usual thing. So Prime Minister opens gob, says we're going to completely reform the justice system. We're going to build 2 more prisons. We're going to put people into prison for less time and let them out quicker. But we're also going to clamp down on street crime. We're going to make the streets safer for everybody. And the police are going, we can't do that.
And you've got this spending review from Rachel Reeves on June the 11th.
Yes.
And this is the prelude to it, right? Because the Home Office is one of those departments, there's a story in the front page of The Guardian, which hasn't agreed its funding settlement.
And they're all arguing with each other.
And they're all arguing with it because they're saying, well, we need more money. And the Home Office is actually set for a real terms cut. Keir Starmer, meanwhile, says, well, I want 13,000 additional police officers. That's a pledge of his goes back to the last election. But the money isn't there. Then you've got this cut in, this reversal in when it comes to the two-child benefit cap. Last year it was to stick up for this to say that the cap should be lifted would get you kicked out of the Labour Party. Now Keir Starmer wants to go back on that. That's £5 billion that the government's got to find, plus £1.5 billion to restore the winter fuel allowance.
And once again, it's all these promises that were supposedly fully costed that they've made, which apparently weren't fully costed. And they can't get away with saying, oh, it's not fully costed because we didn't know there's a big £22 billion black hole, because they literally borrowed $20 billion in April. Do you remember? I think last time we saw each other, that figure had just come out. They've been borrowing more money than they claim they inherited a black hole of.
And the reason
per month.
And the reason they've had to borrow more money and government debt and government borrowing has gone up is because when Rachel Reeves went and put up, and this is the view of the IMF, by the way, she went and put up the national insurance contributions for employers. Investors looked in this country and thought, I don't really fancy investing in Britain now. It looks like I'm going to put in a load of money only to get taxed. I'm not going to get that great return that I might get somewhere else. And therefore, when we look at, and this has happened to an extent with other countries, but the cost of UK debt has risen. We've seen it go up to touching 5% in some cases. This is the point Nigel Farage was making yesterday. And so we're spending, of that £40 billion that Rachel Reeves paid, 10 billion of that's just wiped out on debt interest.
Well, most of the money borrowed in April would have been just paying off other debt interest that they've already got.
It's just.
I mean, if you were living your life like that, you'd literally be in debtor's prison by the end of the summer. It's impossible to see how badly they're running it all. Speaking of Nigel Farage, he made his kind of keynote speech yesterday as the leader of Reform, very much also as the kind of possibly the next Prime Minister of this country, although I think there might be one in between, because I still don't believe Starmer's going to last. I think there'll be somebody else from Labour who pitches up. And I've been reading quite a bit, actually, over the last few days about Angela Rayner's manoeuvrings and how she's... I mean, I can't believe she'll ever get there, but she would obviously clearly quite like to get there.
I mean, if it's down to the Labour membership, she'll get there. And she'll be Prime Minister Rayner. Make no mistake about it. I mean, she's the most popular amongst Labour members. And so if you're playing out your scenario, Mike, where there isn't a general election and we see a Prime Minister in between Starmer and the next general election in 2029, you would have to say that Angela Rayner is odds-on favourite. I did watch, and I saw the clip when she was being interviewed on Sunday, and she was saying, I do not leak. Did anybody, the question comes back, did anybody in your office leak? And of course then she diverts around it and doesn't answer the question. But
she didn't get where she is by being a nice, persuasive gentle individual, did she?
No, but
and I don't have a problem with that, by the way. I mean, she can be as aggressive as she wants to be, and good luck to her. I don't really want her to be Prime Minister, though.
No, but she is by far and away the most popular amongst the Labour. And what you have to look at last week's stories,
but maybe that's their problem. If she's the most popular person they've got from the left of the Labour Party,
and they get to pick.
Yeah.
And what she did, with the release of that document that we saw last week, that's her manifesto.
Yeah.
This is her saying to all of those, that document, it will get your listeners really angry. It will get, they don't want to see a wealth tax. They don't want to see, if they make money, they want to be able to keep that money, right? That wasn't designed, that document wasn't designed for them. It was designed for all those left-wing MPs to say, look at me, this is what I will do. This is my manifesto for running the country. Compare that to Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves making an absolute hash of it.
Yeah.
So it's about her appealing to the left of the party.
Yeah.
And that's why she stuck.
But it's economically illiterate, is it?
Yeah, of course it is.
And none of it would make any sense. But let's have a look at Nigel Farage, because one of the things that he said about powering Britain sort of forward and producing more and more productivity and producing more and more growth actually is physically having more children. Check it out.
We want to go much, much further to encourage people to have children, to make it easier for them to have children. And that is why I also believe that having a transferable tax allowance between married people is the right thing to do. Now, I know many will say, look, marriage is outdated, most people don't bother to get married anymore, and, I'm hardly standing here in front of you as a religious priest and moralising. I'm not sure my own track record was ever so good on this. And we all lead imperfect lives. But what is true, what is absolutely true, and the evidence is there to prove it, is that where people who are married stay together for the longest period of time, the children that grow up in those environments have the best chance of success in life.
And you can't really argue with any of that, can you?
No,
I mean, and the interesting thing is that people have done studies on this, and there's statistical evidence to suggest it, that there are people having lots of children, but they tend to be people who have moved into this country from elsewhere. And they're probably having, I think, more likely to be having more than 3 or 4 children in terms of the immigrant population of this country, whereas the what you might call the homegrown population of this country having fewer and fewer.
Nigel Farage has got this the right way round, by the way. So the problem the Conservatives have, and they've had it for years now, is they've got nothing to offer young people.
Yeah.
So even when you go think back to Theresa May, she was talking about, supporting renters. Well, we've seen what's happened to rent. Even the aspiration of being able to own your own home with the Conservatives, that just went out of the window. And that
will stop a lot of people from having kids.
No, have a lot of people. But it's like, what I think is so interesting about this story, and Henry Hill identifies it. He's got a column on Deputy Editor of Conservative Home on page 12.
We're talking to him later on the show.
It's a good column, actually. And what he's identified is that Nigel Farage is giving young people something. And we know the appeal that he has to the younger generation coming through on TikTok, but he's making a pitch, an offering to young people that you can get on. And I've covered countless stories in the last year or so where we do it always as a joke. It's done as a joke. Young people now have dogs instead of choosing to have babies, or they choose to have a cat. Or the Pope says, there was a story about the Pope saying, young people need to stop having pets and actually start having children.
That was the last Pope, wasn't it?
That was the last Pope, Pope. But the reason they're doing that is because it's so unaffordable.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are living with their parents. I mean, there's loads of stories now about people who have moved out of their parents' homes in their sort of mid or early 20s to go to university or something, and now they've moved back in because they literally can't afford to live anywhere else. And
where I live, we've got a couple of nurseries around where I live, and they're all advertising for children.
Yeah.
Come to our nursery, and they're just not. There's just not the demand.
Right.
The supply's there. They've got all these nurseries, but there's just not the demand.
But there's also a kind of a mixed message here as well, isn't there? Because Nigel Farage has also said he thinks that it's a good idea to lift the 2-child cap on benefits, right? Yeah. Which would tend to suggest that the reason why people don't have more children if they're on benefits is because they won't get extra money for it.
Yeah.
Do we really want people on benefits having more children than the rest of us can afford to pay for? Because that's the reality.
So I think
and he's taken some flack for that.
He has taken some flack from that, and there are lots of conservatively minded voters within reform, and this is going to be a challenge for Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect yesterday. This is going to be a challenge because he's got to recognise that there are those on the right who think actually, and he's got to bring people together ultimately, who think actually we shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
Whereas there are those on the left, and yes, there was a ploy to put Labour under more pressure, but by lifting the cap on two-child benefit cap, actually you are saying and recognising that lots of people on benefits are in work and they're trying to do the right thing, and actually it is not worth penalising them as such. But you are quite right, there is a fracture there between the voters he's drawing in from the right and the voters he's drawing in from the left, and he's got to try and bring them together, and that's going to be very difficult. Not to mention, of course, that his sums at first glance don't add up. But it's not necessarily...
That's unusual for politics, isn't it? I mean, have you checked what's going on in the Treasury?
But that's the right point.
Yeah.
Because the argument from Nigel Farage is, 14 years of Tories, it's going badly. Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves aren't making good on any of their promises. Why not give somebody else?
Well, this is it. I mean, the I newspaper's got the usual suspects of they've got independent economists saying, his promises to slash tax and increase benefits would create financial meltdown, similar to what Liz Truss did. And they're saying, he's got uncosted commitments. Well, I mean, that's how the government's running the country. Uncosted commitments are unravelling with every, why don't they do a story about that? Why don't they say, actually, the Labour government's got uncosted commitments, and that's why the country's, finances are unravelling at a rate of knots.
Yes, and the money for, when it comes to the two-child benefit cap, that's why it's 3.5 billion. I said 5 billion earlier. Wood food allowance is 1.5 billion. The big promise within all of this, which really is raising the income tax threshold per personal allowance to £20,000. That's huge. But he's saying he wants to get rid of net zero. That saves £40 billion a year. If you and then you can have a question mark over whether you get any benefits from it. And
well, you don't spend the money that this government is promising to spend.
£40 billion.
You stop giving a bucket load of money to foreign countries for their net zero commitments.
DEI commitments, he's identified as £7 billion.
Yeah, there's plenty of billions to be saved in terms of some of the international aid that gets paid, and in terms of some of the the commitment that we've made to other countries, farmers in particular, all around the world who are getting money to be more sustainable.
And it was interesting, and the Sun will probably end up, I imagine the Sun will probably end up endorsing Nigel Farage, but he had a different, he's just had a holiday, he had a spring in his step yesterday.
I know how he feels.
I don't know, he went in the same holiday location. He was
I did not run into him, no.
He was very well sometimes. But he was in a good... He knows it's within his grasp.
He's a very good performer as well. Let's have a look at him talking about their main policies.
If we win the next election, we will scrap net zero, something that is costing the Exchequer an extraordinary £40 billion plus every year. There will be no more asylum hotels or houses of multiple occupancy. People who come here illegally across the channel or on the back of lorries will not be allowed to stay. We will scrap the DEI agenda, which is costing the taxpayer up to £7 billion a year throughout the public sector.
And he will get through the electorate with that, because nobody thinks any of that's a good idea anymore, including even most of the companies that employed it in the first place.
Yeah, it will resonate with many of your listeners, Mike, that they'll listen to that and think, actually, this is perfectly doable.
But it's not just the people that listen to this show, because obviously many people listening to this show have already made that transition, and many of them have already voted reform. He's not after them. He's got them, but he has to keep them sweet, as everybody does. And he won't take them for granted. But he wants to go. It's the floating voter scenario, isn't it? I mean, many of the people who voted reform and who listen to this show and watch this show have deserted the Tories for the last time. They're never going back. The idea that Keir Starmer and Dan Hodges got an interesting piece in the Mail today saying that basically that Nigel Farage is in fact dictating policy to the Labour government, and they're reacting to it. But the fact that Starmer thinks that he can make a change on immigration and make himself sound tough, and then all those reform voters will suddenly vote Labour, it ain't happening.
It's not happening. The only thing I've seen is that if in one of the polls that came out a few weeks ago, the only thing I've seen is if he's successful. But we've got small boats crossing.
Doesn't matter.
Is going to go through 50,000. Anyway. No, he's not going to be.
He won't be successful.
The small boats crossings are going to go through 50,000 this year. I think that's going to be a milestone when we get to the end of December,
right.
and we see the number of migrants who've crossed the channel illegally.
Yeah. And you can see he's grasping at straws. He's still hanging on to this number of 24,000 people that were deported, right? Yeah. Which happened back end of last November, and they haven't really deported anybody since then. And then when that one guy was locked up for 25 years, and he tried to claim that, oh yeah, we're smashing the gangs, you know, the gang master character, it turned out he'd been under arrest and in custody since 2023.
The chutzpah of releasing that tweet last week where he said we've halved net migration to 430,000.
Oh, I know.
I literally fell off my chair.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with him. All of the measures that the Conservatives did employ to get that, Labour opposed. Yeah. They voted against them.
But what about Andrew Neil's piece? Because that was something that popped up over the weekend that I saw. I think he wrote it in the Mail on Sunday. That in his 55 years of covering politics, he has never come across a more duplicitous, lying, two-faced, absolute horror show than this Labour government and Keir Starmer. I mean, that's quite an indictment.
Quite the essay, wasn't it, from Andrew?
Yeah.
I mean, he carries such weight, and you can bet that's going to be read. They may, by sensible people within number 10, they'll have looked at that and thought, if we've for Andrew Neil to come out in the way that he did in the Mail with that essay, that would have hurt, because the whole point of Starmer's project was that he was going to be the man who restored integrity. Yeah. He was going to be the man who
transparency.
Brought government back to public service.
Well, I put out a tweet, I think, a week or so ago before I went away. You know, do you remember when he said country first, party second? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many times.
And?
Yeah.
Well.
And then you ended up, but we knew that was all done for in the first few weeks when you let Lord Ali with a AAA pass access to Downing Street in return for funding his spectacles to the tune of £2,500.
Exactly. Extraordinary stuff. Theo Rushwood's here at 6:36. We've got more coming up, including the cost of living crisis, because it turns out that despite Keir Starmer pledging, I think in a Lidl store not more than a week ago, that food prices are going to come down as a result of his great deal with the European Union, they've actually started going up again. Of course they have. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 6:38, and we are here, of course, for the duration. Theo Rushwood is here. I'm here till 10 o'clock. He's here till 7. Should we have a look at King Charles? He's on quite a few of the front pages this morning. He's on the front page of the Times. It says, King defends sovereignty of Canada. I'm slightly uneasy about this. I mean, I know that people will say, well, he is the king of not only the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, but he's also the Commonwealth leader and all of that, so he has to go to these countries. But have a look at this, where he talks about how Canada is not for sale.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. All Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power on any continent can ever take away.
Well, that's obviously a bit of a swipe at Donald Trump, isn't it?
Yeah, and Donald Trump's due to visit for a state visit in September, and I think I don't quite understand. I listened to the speech yesterday, and I was a little bit. I felt a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I thought
that's what I'm saying.
You're holding yourself a slight hostage to fortune with that visit from Donald Trump. When Donald Trump talks about Canada being a 51st state, what he's, and it's obvious from what he's saying, because if you watch that meeting that he had with Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister in the Oval Office, what he's saying is, I want you to sort out the fentanyl problem.
Yes.
I want you to stop the fentanyl crossing our border. And if you're not going to do it, then we'll just take control. But he's done the same. He did the same when he talked about, you know, turning Gaza into a Riviera.
Yeah.
We can't just go through the same scenario of allowing the Palestinian people back into Gaza, allowing Hamas to take control of Gaza, and then start going and having another...
And also Mark Carney sort of made out that this was practically, you know, sort of tanks on the lawn time, which it never was, right?
No,
it was all about trade. It was all about, you know, being a good neighbour, rather than, you know, if you don't do this, we're going to invade your country and, you know, and seize it militarily.
So what Donald... This is the easiest way I've kind of come to think about it. Donald Trump is the parent who goes up to the teenager's room and says, tidy your room.
Yeah.
And the teenager has the headphones and goes, no.
Right.
I'm not going to sort out the fentanyl problem. I don't need to sort out the fentanyl problem. Why should I bother sending out the phone?
Right.
So he goes back downstairs and he comes up with a sack of bin bags and he says, tidy your room or I'm going to tidy your room.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Do what I need you to do.
Exactly.
Sort out the fentanyl problem, or I'm just going to do it my way.
And Mark Carney, you know, who was one of the most useless governors of the Bank of England we ever had, and I'm pretty sure will be a useless Prime Minister of Canada, was full of fire and brimstone, wasn't he? You know, when he won his election, he was like, you know, it's going to be just like the hockey. We'll beat you at this too, you know. And then he went to the White House and he sat there literally like a hamster, saying nothing. You know, and Trump was sort of mildly rebuking him here and taking the mickey out of him there, and he literally had nothing to say. Yeah. He was like a little mouse.
And if
seriously,
and if the King's going to, you know, I don't know if this has been written on the express direction of the government or advisors, but I would have written that in a much more indirect way. I'd have kept it much shorter.
Yeah.
And just let.
He's fallen for it, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's basically fallen for the spin that Canada's given him because he's not very sophisticated when it comes to political thinking. I'm afraid. I'm sorry to say that, King Charles, but you're not.
He just needs to, and just rise above it. He just needs to, you know, take himself out of it, let Trump and Carney have their squabble. Canada's not going to...
And you can imagine the Queen, right? Queen Elizabeth II, what she would have done, and that's what I always think. Whenever he makes a bit of a sort of a heavy-footed blunder, you just go, that's not what she would have said. No. She would have said something far more subtle because she was far cleverer. But let's talk about food prices, because we talk about it a lot on this show. I'm absolutely convinced that the so-called food inflation figure, which is apparently rising to 2.8% now in this month, from 2.6. Back in April, I said 2.6% is a joke. Everybody I speak to, and people who message into us here on the show, say things have doubled in price or tripled in price. They haven't just gone up, you know, like 3 or 4% or even 10%. They've gone up 50%, 100%. But here's Starmer. This was just, what, 10 days ago? In Lidl's. He made a special visit to Lidl's to see what they would think of him.
We're in Lidl because the deal that we struck yesterday will mean lower prices in our supermarket, shelves like this, and that is really good news for customers of Lidl, for the staff of Lidl, and for all of those involved in food and agriculture. And so there's real buzz. I've just been with the staff. They're very pleased because they know that for their customers, for their families, it makes a real difference. I have to say, when I was with the staff, they were equally excited about the e-gates and being able to go on their holidays, which they've obviously already planned, and not be in the horrendously long queues. So on both fronts, lower prices in places like Lidl and the e-gates so they can go on holiday more quickly. The staff here are very pleased to see the work on the deal that we did yesterday.
He's got that face, hasn't he? He's got the Rachel Reeves is a woman face. They're really pleased about the e-gates. He's now speaking on behalf of the Lidl staff, right? I'm not sure he really can guarantee that he can speak on behalf of the Lidl staff. And there's also another clip where he's actually standing with the Lidl staff and they all look at him like... Because he can't talk to the members of the public because they would literally flame him and just go, you're talking absolute cobblers, you know. Nobody cares about the e-gates, right? Because one...
Nothing's changed.
As we said, nothing's changed. It's got nothing to do with the EU anyway. Some people let you use the e-gates like they do in Portugal, some don't.
And it's literally, they've got like a word in a memo saying, You can introduce e-gates if you want.
And he's going, and they'll be able to go on holiday quicker. They haven't got any money to go on holiday, you plonker. They can't afford to go on bleeding holiday because the food prices are going through the roof. And according to Helen Dickinson, the chief executive of the British Retail Consortium, right? She says the acceleration in the price of food is driven by retailers passing on increased labour costs after measures from the Chancellor's October budget took effect last month. It's very straightforward. There is no question. Retailers now absorbing the additional £5 billion in costs from April's increased employer national insurance contributions and national minimum wage. It's no surprise that inflation is rearing its head once again. You know, we know why the prices are going up. It's because of the bleeding government.
They put up taxes, and the problem is that they didn't consult. The supermarkets. It's a labour heavy. They have they have a large workforce, right from sourcing foods to warehouses and then putting it onto the shelves and serving customers. These supermarkets employ tens of thousands of people.
Yeah.
So if you put up the margin just by a fraction, you could say 2p in the pound. What does it matter in terms of employers? And none of them, I dare say, have worked in a supermarket, certainly run a business, but it is a huge cost. I was speaking to I think I might have told you the story. I can't remember if I've told you the story, but there was when Farage was in Scunthorpe, he did a walkabout and he stopped at a cafe. I was just chatting to the owner of the cafe. She employs 16 staff.
Yeah.
Her costs have gone up £23,000 a year.
Yeah.
Her overheads just because of that tax rise, and that's just on a workforce of 16 members of staff.
Yeah.
Imagine if you've got 16,000 members of staff. You're talking that's 23 million.
Yeah, it's an awful lot of money, and this is the thing, the government just doesn't get it, I'm afraid. Have a look at this from Steve in Cambridge. Great to have you back. He says, can you answer as to why our king, as king of country and territories, including the Chagos Islands, why did he do nothing to stop Starmer giving them away and paying for the privilege? Very good question. You know, he's all over in Canada there telling us about sovereignty, but he doesn't mind us giving away the Chagos Islands. Ella in Staffordshire, I'm afraid the king has overstepped. He's losing support and becoming too political. He again appears to be putting other countries before Britain, and that's what people see. He is finished, in my opinion. And Lee from Hampshire, just finally, before we take another little break. Morning, Mike. Not convinced on lifting the two-child benefit cap. If Reform are planning on lifting the tax-free allowance to $20,000, that's a further $7,500 per person. So $15,000 per couple. Isn't that enough to fund extra children? That's a good point. You know, and maybe you can't do everything. But again, like all politicians, you know, he will be scrutinised more than anybody else. You know, nobody will say to Nigel Farage, well, what if you do a U-turn in the midst of your first term in office? And they'll make out that that's the biggest crime that any Prime Minister can commit. And yet, very few people go after Keir Starmer for doing exactly the same thing. But we'll come back after this at 6:47.
We have things like the Diamond Diversity Report, which I used to look at when I wasn't allowed to speak or wasn't allowed to be on the BBC, which will show you that minorities are overrepresented, at least on TV, by about 2.5 times. So we have the stats to show if you are a white man, you actually are being prejudiced against. I was told by somebody very high up at one of the main channels, very, very high up, that is, unfortunately we can't have someone who looks like Louis Theroux. And they said, look, we'll take the ideas, but we need somebody who is a minority to be on the screen.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:49. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. Of course, it's good to be back. I've been away for a few days. Theo Usher was here as well. I was on a plane, actually, funnily enough, just yesterday evening. And I have to say, I was in Dubai. Dubai Airport is an absolute joy to behold. You know,
Is
when
it
you
nice?
consider, yeah, it's not just nice, it's big, it's clean, it's cool. In fact, I got back to Heathrow, and Heathrow was hotter than Dubai Airport, despite the fact that in Dubai, outside, it was about, 39 degrees, because there's just no air conditioning, it's stuffy, Anyway, have a look at this, though. This is a Delta flight taking off from Minneapolis, right? It got delayed from takeoff because after not one, but 2 pigeons were found inside the plane. Have a look at this. Yeah, have another look at this. You'd think it was some kind of bird of prey that was coming to attack them all. Like that, remember that bird that attacked the people up in wherever it was, Yorkshire? The bloke with the bleeding face. We should play that again just for that. It's a pigeon. My goodness me, mind you, I tell you what, there was only one, I suppose, sort of chink in the trip coming back. There was a child that kept running up and down the aisle, and his father kept going, "Stop running." And at one point, I was about to put my foot out, but he was too little, because he was only about 3 or 4, and he wouldn't shut up, and he just kept running. That's all he could hear, and it was like, "Tell your son to stop," But anyway, it was all fine in the end. We were all quite calm because he couldn't even have a drink because I was coming back and driving home, so I couldn't even avail myself of the free booze. But never mind. Let's talk about Keir Starmer's new net zero drive, because the Mail have got a great piece here with Ross Clark talking about a £10 million AI data centre that's going to be built, and it's still on the airport sort of theme, because it's going to emit as much CO2 as an airport would, and yet he's still pursuing his net zero plan.
Yes.
How does that actually add up?
Well, it doesn't. But bottom line, it doesn't. But this is plans for an AI data centre up in Blythe, in the northeast.
Right. Because they use huge amounts of electricity, don't they? And
they use huge amounts of water. Although this one apparently is not using water. It's using it's in Northumberland. It's using some sort of refrigeration technique. But I didn't realise this. Apparently, this is it. A simple inquiry on ChatGPT, for example, is estimated to gobble up 10 times as much electricity as a Google search. So all of this energy has to come from anywhere. But of course, because and this will be Keir Starmer's excuse, because it's not, if you can power this thing without fossil fuels, then that's okay then. But they use
but they can't, can they?
Well, they can't, no, because the Ed Miliband plans for net zero don't work.
No,
and they don't.
And they're being pretty much more and more exposed as not being able to work.
Yeah, and the other thing, my other real problem with AI is, I understand everybody wants to get AI into this country and AI to do things, but those are jobs. Those are skilled jobs. Those are, if we're just saying let's just race for AI, that's not good news.
No,
that's not good news for people.
All it is good news for the big tech companies, isn't it?
Yeah,
who are going to make an awful lot of money out of it.
And it's good news. And it's good news for the people at the very, very top of businesses. But you don't need accountants. You don't need lawyers.
Right.
You don't need...
Well, that's good news if you don't need lawyers. That's the first bit of good news you've told me all day. That's brilliant.
I was saying that as my wife's a lawyer. And I was
is she?
She does the presentation. She can do a presentation, and she can do a presentation using AI.
Yeah.
And it's great. The presentation's all done. It's on AI. But, I dare say one day...
You see, that tells me that being a lawyer is not very creative. Because if you can recreate what a lawyer can do, then, what's the point of the lawyer? Whereas you can't recreate an awful lot of what AI can also purport to do, like, for example, upset Elton John by writing Elton John-style songs. They really can't, because they can maybe make it sound a bit like an Elton John song, but it's not Elton John.
No,
you know what I mean?
But the other thing is that I have the same taste in Elton John and the same love as Elton John as you do.
Yeah.
But you do worry that this technology is only going to get better and better and better.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then suddenly,
and that's what he's saying.
And then suddenly, it really will sound like an Elton John song. And that Elton John, having the talent and the ability to write that song, suddenly loses ownership over that song because AI just takes it all. And AI takes, will come into, there's a huge amount of creative industry in this country, not least in this building as it happens.
Absolutely, and we're very much fighting it.
And where people are using their ingenuity and talent to come up with new ways of telling people stories or whatever it might be, or writing books. And if that stuff is available to AI supercomputers that can just dip in and take it, then there should be a fee paid.
It's a huge worry, and there should at least be a fee paid if it should not be indeed prohibited in some way. But I'm also of the feeling that an awful lot of the proper creativity that goes on in this building can't be reproduced. You can't just make up an AI version of you or I or Jeremy Clarkson. You just can't do it, or Chris Evans. You can't. I just don't believe that will happen. Let's get a voice note though from Andrew on Nigel Farage.
Hey Mike, nice to have you back. Listening to Nigel Farage's speech there and what he's going to bin off and everything if they get elected, I can't wait for that day to happen. It's a shame we're a long way off a general election yet, because I think now would be a great time. So hopefully he can keep on making momentum, and the sooner old Keith Stomer is out, the better. Can't believe a word that man says. Cheers, Mike.
That's a new one, Keith Stomer. Thank you, Andrew. Very well put. We were talking about the cost of living crisis, but here's one which will just make you laugh, I think. Aggro in the aisles, it says on page 25 of The Sun. Pilates pile-up at Aldi stores. Apparently, there's a new Pilates machine, and they've got a picture of it. It looks quite complicated. I don't think I could do that. £150 for the machine. Apparently, it's causing stampedes in stores nationwide because people are sitting on them to make sure that they can get their hands on them, queuing up to get them. Women are fighting over them. I mean, this is unbelievable. It's like the old days. Do you remember the old days of the Harrods sale, where people would wait outside and then sort of fight their way in to get the, boxes full of crockery and be hitting people over the head with pans and things? I mean, it's a bit like that, isn't it?
One shopper describing the clash, a clash in Aldi, is effing ridiculous. You were at the back of the queue and I was holding it before you, shouted another, and then a third person chimes in and says, this is not happening. This has all been taken from, and Aldi seem to be stoking it. I mean, they're saying limber up, because once they're gone, they're gone. The old middle aisle. I don't know why anybody would want one of these machines. But
apparently it's a strength building kit favoured by people like Margot Robbie, and Jennifer Aniston.
But they're very. I think the usual version, if you go and buy it,
is a lot more.
Is $1,000. They're thousands of pounds for
one. Another good reason not to bother. How about this? Managers are afraid to ring employees who are off sick in case they're accused of bullying. According to Sir Charlie Mayfield, who's the former boss of John Lewis Partnership, who's apparently now Labour's work czar.
Yes.
I didn't know they had a work czar. Where did they get this guy from? Is this another Labour quango we didn't know about?
He's a czar. He's been brought in by Keir Starmer to basically try and get, boost work. And
hasn't John Lewis been a bit of an unmitigated disaster over the last few years? It has, hasn't it? They've lost market share. They've lost share price. They put the wrong person in charge of their company. Focused on the wrong things.
And this is
great. Hire him. Bring him in.
He's our man.
Give him a job for the government.
But this is alongside an article. The Mail have done this quite nicely. It's just a smaller story, but they've done it quite nicely because they've done it work from home allowed to hire a gardener, and they tell the story of an IT director called Ben Wickin, who was due to meet a founder to try and resolve a disagreement about holiday cover of his IT company, but Mr. Boudet told an employment tribunal in Croydon that he was very disappointed when Mr. Wickin, this IT consultant, said he needed to hold it online because he had hired a gardener and wanted to supervise his work from home. So he's going to stay at home.
I'm pretty sure I saw a piece, did I not, back end of last week, saying that Britain is now the working from home capital of Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got more people working from home than ever.
But this has happened. If you go to a recruitment consultant, especially for a white collar job, it's all part of the package. Work from home is just baked in.
Yeah, right.
I was hearing the other day that one recruiter was, they say they sort of say really painfully, well, I'm afraid it's 3 days in the office.
They say timorously.
Is that
going to be okay?
Is that going to be? Yeah, is that going to be?
I mean, just ridiculous.
3 days in the office. We could maybe maybe do 2 days in the office.
No. I suppose you should give a final mention to a big piece in most of the papers on the 3 new characters being chosen for the TV version of Harry Potter. We've got Arabella Stanton, Dominic McLaughlin and Alistair Stout, who are going to be Hermione, Harry and Ron. I wonder if they're going to turn on J.K. Rowling in about 10 years and accuse her of being a horrible wizened old witch for not representing trans people properly.
Yes.
That's what the other lot did.
Yes, 32,000 children and who applied for this. And
I know. What a great...
There was one of them, though. There was one of them, actually, and I don't know which one it was, who was asked about it, and the PR said, don't answer it.
Yeah.
And then he said, actually, J.K. Rowling's got a lot of good... stood up for a lot of things.
She has. Well, she's a great woman. We support her here. This is Morning Glory. We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a 5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to 3 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham, and we are back here at Morning Glory. Obviously, we've got plenty to talk about between now and 10 o'clock, including most of the front pages this morning, of course, on the horror of what happened up in Liverpool. Many people still in hospital recovering from their injuries. Parade horror driver was on drugs, according to the front page of The Sun. Parade driver was high on drugs. Suspect arrested for attempted murder after tailgating an ambulance. We were asking that question, and we will be asking that question coming up throughout the course of the show. How is it possible that this character driving a Ford Galaxy could actually get through any kind of barrier in order to somehow follow an ambulance for what appears to be at least 5 minutes, doing something like 5 miles per hour? How is that possible, and what were the police doing, and why did they not stop him? This one from Nigel says, raid the roadblock in Liverpool as a security officer who has worked roadblocks for large events in the past, rather than insinuate the police to blame for allowing the Galaxy after the ambulance. Perhaps questions should be asked as to who was manning the barrier and what training they had. Well, that may well be, but surely the final responsibility rests with the police, doesn't it? Because it's their policing of the event which has been called into question. And I'm not talking about why the man was not stopped at the barrier, although he should have been. I'm wondering why he wasn't stopped at any point before he actually started running into people. That seems to be the big question. Front page of the Times goes with police safety fears over jail plan. It looks as though Keir Starmer's plan to release prisoners early could in fact be, in the words of the heads of the Metropolitan Police, the MI5 and National Crime Agency, net detriment to public safety. In other words, bloody dangerous. Don't do it, Sir Keith. Why do you think letting dangerous prisoners out of prison is a good idea? Oh, because it will make the prisons safer. Well, we don't want the prisons safer than the streets. We want the streets safer than the prisons. It's not difficult, this stuff, is it? Cannabis should not be criminalised, says Sadiq Khan. Great. I'll tell you what we should criminalise, though, motorists, because he's going to put an extra £3 on the congestion charge. As long as you're smoking a joint while you're driving, you'll be fine. But if you're not, you'll be charged £20. Oh, sorry, £18 now for the privilege. Absolutely incredible. I'm glad to see that the country has still gone to absolute rack and ruin. I've been away 5 days. It's getting worse, by the way. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We're going to talk as well about Nigel Farage. He wants us all to have more children. I've already had 4. How many more do you want me to have? I'm not sure I can afford any more. They cost quite a lot of money. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Phil says this from Coventry. This country is seriously broken and beyond the saving. Our politicians are seriously out of touch with the public and thoroughly incompetent. Not sure where it'll all end. Keep up the good work, though. Thank you, Phil. I will try to do that. And on the subject of Nigel Farage, lots of you have got things to say. Sophia says, morning, Mike. Great to see you back. Instead of scrapping the 2-child benefit cap, why not give tax breaks per child that working people have? Surely that makes more sense and incentivises working people to have more children, which is what we need, not people on benefits having more children. Have a good day. I think that's right. I think a lot of people would not mind if you were to give, say, tax breaks to people, even though, of course, that's a net cost to the economy and a net cost to the rest of us. But rather than giving people a benefit for having a child, give them a tax break, because that also encourages them then, does it not, to go to work. Let's ask Jo, because she is here. She is, of course, Joanna Bell, political journalist. What are we going to do to get people to have more children, Joanna?
Oh God, I don't know. I'm childless, so look. Women are working. They have to shoulder all the responsibility with families. It's not really a money thing per se. I mean, there's wealthy countries typically have a lower birth rate. You've seen it in Japan, Germany. They've done everything to get the birth rate up, but none of it's worked because women are working. And they don't have time to raise big families. Yes.
No, and I think there's some truth to that. But I think, would you not be more likely as a working woman to, say, have another child if you got a tax break as opposed to if you got an actual benefit, as it were?
100%. Yeah, they should give a tax benefit. Instead of giving money away, they should definitely give the benefit of, less tax to pay.
I mean, there used to be a system in this country, I think, where the married couples allowance was something which I think has been done away with for many, many years. I mean, I don't remember even getting it. But I think my parents used to talk about getting it, where if you were a married couple, because it sort of also encouraged people to get married, so it's a bit traditional. But if you're a married couple, you had a married couples allowance, and you paid less tax than, say, 2 people who were living together.
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to work in the tax office in Ireland, and they have that system, the married tax credit. They have, the family tax credit. It's, we have the same system that's in Britain, but Britain's done away with it. Right. So it's absolutely disgraceful that they're actually giving money instead of doing the tax credit, like you say. Yeah. But I think it's all just an emotional reaction. It's questionable whether it encourages people to have kids. But, Nigel's saying all the right things.
Well, he is. Let's have a look at what he's saying about this having children business.
We want to go much, much further to encourage people to have children, to make it easier for them to have children. And that is why I also believe that having a transferable tax allowance between married people is the right thing to do. Now, I know many will say, look, marriage is outdated. Most people don't bother to get married anymore. And, I'm hardly standing here in front of you as a religious priest and moralising. I'm not sure my own track record was ever so good on this. And we all lead imperfect lives. But what is true, what is absolutely true, and the evidence is there to prove it, is that where people who are married stay together for the longest period of time, the children that grow up in those environments have the best chance of success in life.
Now, this, of course, used to be, Joe, the mantra of the Conservative Party, but they seem to have lost it somewhere along the way.
Well, exactly. And now, you know, there's talk about Rupert Lowe joining it. So maybe they're trying to adopt some of Nigel Farage's ideology. It's insane how the whole political party system has flipped. And the Conservative Party is no longer conservative when they should be, you know, extolling conservative values, which they haven't done for many, many years.
No.
Nigel, he's really, really saying all the right things. And, you know, Keir Starmer is just copying everything that he says. He's a very weak leader.
Yeah, well, Dan Hodges has got a piece in the Mail today basically saying that Nigel Farage is now dictating government policy. He's basically giving, well, every time he says anything, Keir Starmer nicks it.
That's exactly it. And it just shows he's a weak leader. He's anti-business. He's anti-family. He just panders to public opinion. And, you know, we really don't need a prime minister like that. You know, he's just...
Well, he's only doing that now, of course, because he tried going the other way. When he started to go, let's do something that the public doesn't like. And then he realised that actually made him incredibly unpopular. I can't imagine why it takes these politicians so long to work this stuff out. So he does a load of stuff that people didn't like. Now he's really unpopular. So now he thinks, I know, I'll do some stuff that they really want me to do. But it still hasn't worked because he's that useless.
Well, exactly. He's done a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. You know, it's just another example of his weak leadership. He's bleeding Britain dry. You know, he's taking jobs away, giving away the territories like the Chagos Islands. You know, he's meant to be a leader, but he's not. He's a follower.
He really is. And also his new plan, which is going to be the latest U-turn probably, because we now know that he's probably likely to U-turn on the two-child benefit cap. Front page of the Times today, his plan to release prisoners early could be apparently not very good for public safety. Well, I could have told them that before I went away. Why do they need MI5 to tell them this?
It's ridiculous. So they're letting rapists, paedophiles, aggravated burglars out of prison, and meanwhile Lucy Connolly put a tweet on Twitter or Facebook and she's in prison for 31 months and no sign of release anytime soon.
Still in prison. Yeah, I'll tell you what I've been amazed by is a number of people that I've been reading over the last few days since I've been away who have supported the fact that she's still in prison. You know, what on earth are they thinking about?
This is the whole thing. I mean, you imagine that left-wing politics, there would be freedom of speech, but actually they're the ones who are the most anti-free speech. And it's crazy because this woman is not a threat to anybody. She's not a threat to anybody in society. And yet they've thrown the book at her. Yeah. And now they're letting out rapists. They should be building supermax prisons.
I know.
And yet they haven't. There's no sign of any building for any prisons. You know, Wandsworth is completely overcrowded. They have prison cells which are meant for one person, which are, you know, housing two people. It's ridiculous. There's that much space between the beds. They don't have any space in the prisons. And, you know, I don't see a way out of this unless they build more prisons, which nobody seems to be talking about.
They've said they're going to try and build 2 more prisons, but that will take God knows how long because we build everything so slowly in this country. But 6 separate police chiefs writing in the Times today, Joe, basically saying that without serious investment, they won't be able to do what Starmer's been promising to do, which is to halve knife crime, halve violence against women and girls, and appoint 13,000 additional frontline police. They haven't got the money for it. He said it can't happen.
Well, maybe this is what happened in Liverpool. You know, there's not enough police. You know, it's crazy. They're letting out all these, you know, prisoners who are danger to the society, and yet they're cutting the police force.
Yeah.
So people are not going to be safe on the streets. I can't remember the last time I saw a policeman on the street.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's the Wild West out there, Mike.
And that's why all the criminals know it. And they also know that even if they do get caught, there's no chance of them going to prison because there's no place for them to be put. But how about this, though? Sadiq Khan on the front page of The Telegraph, we haven't really done this story yet this morning, he says cannabis should not be a criminal offence. He says he wants it to be decriminalised. He says there are concerns that drug laws are damaging police relations with ethnic communities. I mean, how ridiculous is that? So because he says ethnic communities smoke a lot of cannabis and deal a lot of drugs, we should just make it not any longer a criminal offence.
This is ridiculous. I mean, I just read a piece in I think it was the Telegraph magazine at the weekend, where some guy on cannabis launched himself off the Westfield shopping centre balcony and landed on a woman and left her paralysed. You know, it causes psychosis, cannabis.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that guy that killed those little girls up in Southport, I think he was on cannabis as well.
Right.
It
Well, we're
causes
hearing that we haven't been told what drugs he was on, but we've been told that the driver of the van, the people carrier in Liverpool, was also on drugs. We don't know what drugs, but you know, there's probably a pretty good chance it might be cannabis.
Well, exactly, Mike. You know, you shouldn't legalize. They've legalized it in New York, and it's absolutely horrible. You know, you wake up in the morning and go to work, and there's people smoking big skunk joints on the street. Vagrants, you know.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah, I had the same problem. I went to Los Angeles back in quite a long time ago, 2019, I think it was, and the stench of the stuff was everywhere. I mean, to be honest, in London, it's pretty bad. It might as well be decriminalised in London already in terms of actual, you know, the possession of it.
Well, you can get a prescription in England if you want, which, you know, is sanctioned, but you can get it through the NHS. So if someone wants a prescription, they can actually get one and drive with it. But, you know...
That's not for smoking it, though, is it? Isn't that for some other cannabis
No,
product?
they give it everything. Yeah,
Really?
no, my friend has it. Yeah, they make it up in Sunderland. And so people can already get a prescription. And it's actually shocking. It's pretty much, if you've got any kind of mood disorder or anxiety, you can get a prescription. I shouldn't be telling people that.
Well, yeah, I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got a clip, I think, Sadiq Khan talking about it.
I think we need to have an honest, open conversation about the evidence in relation to the issue of cannabis and whether our laws in the UK, whether our experience of the health consequences in relation to crime, consequences in the community, what the future is.
I mean, he's in charge of Britain's biggest police force, right? And he's now saying he doesn't think it should be made a criminal offence. He says that cannabis laws are disproportionate to the harms that it can pose, particularly in the case of possession for personal use. I've never heard of anybody going to prison for possessing cannabis, have you?
No, but all it's going to do is bring vagrants onto the street with drugs and the smell, and it's just going to intimidate people even more. You're going to have people that never did drugs taking gummies and oil and everything else, and it's going to have a massive effect on the nightlife because people won't drink anymore. And it's happened in New York. It hasn't, you know, if it's not, people don't go to jail right now for holding it, so you might as well just keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
Why change something? You know, it's just going to destroy the fabric of Britain's society.
Yeah. No, exactly right. Good to talk to you, Joanna. Thank you very much indeed. Joanna Bell there with her take on some of the news this morning. George in Dorset says, "Morning, Mike. Starmer is a liar yet again. I got held up for ages at Gare du Nord this month. The EU entry and exit system has failed, causing delays. It has now been delayed until October. Holidaymakers will still have to queue." Yeah, well, I mean, you would probably have to queue anyway until and unless each individual country wants to make the e-gate situation easier, then it will remain exactly as it is. And I said this at the time. Quite often, if you go to some parts of Europe, actually the queue, which is a non-EU queue, is easier to navigate than the one that is the EU queue because there's hardly anybody in it. Good morning, Mike. Says Peter, I thought Nigel Farage's speech was excellent. Reform now have time to hone their policies so as not to frighten the so-called financial experts. Starmer is trying to steal Reform's policies, but most sensible people know it's just more lies and sound bites. That's true. And Sean in Gloucester says, where Nigel Farage has a massive advantage over all of the others is that he understands you have to control spending rather than endlessly taxing more to raise ever more money. It's the first rule of business. Keep expenses as low as possible. None of the other career politicians understand this. No, they don't, because they've never had to control spending because it's not any of their money. It never is any of their money. And that, unfortunately, for most of the people who are paying taxes in this country is the reality. Because we've already seen Rachel Reeves wrecking the economy. There's now a big fight going on between the Treasury and the Prime Minister's office as to whether or not he can rein in Rachel Reeves with her public spending cuts, because that's what the left of the party wants, and they want to put more taxes on instead. He doesn't really want to do that. They don't know what they're doing, do they? It's 18 minutes past 7.
He's basically in bed with Keir Starmer on this one. It is fundamentally unfair to say to people who maybe only have 2 children themselves because they can't afford to have any more, who go out to work early in the morning, do a long, hard day's work, pay their taxes, why should those people subsidise others who perhaps don't work, yet nonetheless have large numbers of children who they can't afford to support themselves? Why should hard-working taxpayers subsidise those people? The public, by the way, overwhelmingly support the 2-child cap, including 84% of Reform voters. So Nigel Farage has got this completely wrong.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. 20 minutes past 7. I've just been away for a few days. We'll talk about that and the matters arising from it over the course of the next couple of days, as and when it comes up. I'm not going to give you a sort of chapter and verse of what happened. But I was in Dubai, which is quite a remarkable place. The last time I was there was 1994, believe it or not. So literally 30 years ago. And it's obviously an awful lot bigger now than it was. But I was struck by how remarkably sort of well run it was, actually. How great the roads were, how unfilled with potholes they were, how great the airport was, how quickly you could get through it, how anything you wanted to do was apparently fairly easy to do. Yes, it's quite an expensive place to be, but it doesn't have to be as expensive as probably the time that I spent in it. But it was quite a remarkable place. We'll come back to that. Let's get a voice note from B on food prices.
Mike B from the Midlands. Just a quick point. 12 organic eggs, 2021, £2.10, £5.5 now. Have a great day.
Thank you very much indeed, B. Yeah, absolutely right. It's incredible, isn't it, how much prices have gone up. It really is. I mean, I'm not buying any of this, 2.6%, 2.8%, even regular inflation at 3.5%. I know people will say, yeah, but you don't include certain things in it. But in the end, you have to include everything that people end up spending money on, whether that's an official or an unofficial inflation figure. I don't care. Bit of breaking news, by the way. Water regulator Ofwat has fined Thames Water almost £123 million following 2 investigations, the largest ever fine from the regulator. Will it make any difference, though? And has Thames Water got the money? Because what they'll probably say is that they haven't got the money and they'll need to figure it all out. We shall see. We'll bring you more on that as we can. Let's talk now, though, to Sue Wright, a businesswoman up in Liverpool. She was at the parade over the weekend, of course, with her 3 children. Terrible, terrible tragedy of a man who, apparently high on drugs, according to the papers this morning, was able to tailgate an ambulance driving through a part of the city which should have been basically roped off and unavailable to ordinary drivers, coming down Dale Street and Water Street, down to the Strand and the Liver building at the bottom there of the sort of the waterfront. Beautiful part of Liverpool, actually. Sue, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for joining us. Whereabouts were you on the route, if that makes any sense?
Okay, so we'd got the training that day with me and my 3 children. We were on the Strand. We realised that something serious had happened when an air ambulance helicopter landed very close to us, and then there were streams of ambulances just racing everywhere. The whole atmosphere and tension just changed. I was scanning police officers' faces, and you could just tell it was something very serious. I just wanted to get out of the city then because I thought this is not good, whatever's happened. There was then rumours, being circulated around us. You could hear people talking, saying there's been a terrorist attack. Right. I was not trying to let my children hear that. I was telling them it was okay. 2 of my girls were absolutely hysterical at this point. And my offices are actually on Dale Street, so I actually used my local knowledge, because I know the area very well, I'm from Liverpool, and used the back streets to try and stay away from the crowd, and weaved our way back into Dale Street very quickly, but not realising that Dale Street flows into Water Street, and we ended up in the centre of the carnage, which had just recently happened. So a short while later, the side streets were then all closed off. We then tried to literally get out the city.
Yeah.
And as I say, I know the city very well. I'm then getting messages through on my phone intermittently because the signal went as well, which was just adding really to the...
Because it always does in those situations, doesn't it? Because so many people are trying to use their phones.
Yeah, exactly. I tried to get into a McDonald's because it was just absolutely full of people trying to log on to their Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I managed to left the kids outside and ran into this McDonald's to try and get a signal. Just couldn't even get on their Wi-Fi. And then for the next 3 hours, and when I looked back on my phone the next day, it was actually 8 miles. We zigzagged across the city in this horrendous situation. It was pouring down with rain, it was cold, and it was a mixture really of people who were in, frivolity and joy and celebration, and in alcohol as well, who either didn't know what had happened or were just celebrating, mixed with people just walking past us in complete shock and terror and frightened. And I think that the most challenging bit for me in those 3 hours was, one, trying to keep the kids calm, and two, trying to siphon out what was factual and what was not factual, because some of the messages when signals were available on my phone was that there'd been another attack at Moorfield Station, which is one of the main stations, which was untrue, that there'd been a stabbing, that it was definitely a terrorist attack. I then saw a video of police snipers on the main building at the front by the Strand. And, this just all added to a sense of, when you look back on previous terrorist attacks, and, I know somebody in the anti-terrorism squad, and they've all said to me, when these things happen, there's like sort of a second one shortly afterwards. So you're just wanting to try and avoid the crowds, and that was very difficult because everywhere was crowded. I went to 3 stations, couldn't get into any of them. I decided to walk north out of the city towards Sand Hills, which is a further out station. Got halfway there, my daughter's heels were bleeding from blisters on her trainers, just to add to everything. And then I was told that Sand Hills wouldn't take trains back to the Wirral. So I then walked back into the city, and eventually we managed to get home 3 hours after this. I think for me, one of the most, there was a lot of things we saw that day, but I think the single image which stands out for me was the abandoned pram that I saw, because, that was a very pivotal moment where a mother must have grabbed her baby out of that pram and just ran, because you couldn't push the pram through the crowds with everything that was going on.
I mean, the thing that I've been asking this morning is, I don't know Liverpool that well, but I do know a little bit of the Strand and the waterfront there, and a bit of Water Street, I guess. But from what it looks like, the run, where it says it took about 5 minutes for the van, for the people carrying the ambulance to come through Dale Street down towards Water Street. It looks like quite a long way. That is it, about half a mile or something?
So I've seen 2 videos. I mean, everyone's seen the videos. They're horrendous. So the first video, where there's a phone shop in the background, that's right outside our offices. So that's number one. That's Dale Street. That's right by the town hall. And then Dale Street bleeds into Water Street, and then you go down Water Street, and then where the incident happens, you'll actually see there's bars on the right, etc. You'll see all the signage there where that happened, and that's outside of India Buildings. Now, from that first point, I don't know how further up Dale Street any other incident happened, but on the Dale Street point, there is clearly something had happened, because there's a first group of people trying to stop him and attack his car, and then he opens his door, shuts his door, and then he drives off. And then what I'll call the main incident, happens further down the road. So in answer to your question, the distance between the point on Dale Street, the first video that I've seen, and then the major incident on Water Street, I would say it's about, maybe 700 metres, something like that. It's not a insignificant.
It's a fairly long way, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Well, it's a very long way when the road was closed and it was full of people.
Because I'm not trying to. I mean, the two questions for me is how he got through the roadblock behind an ambulance, and also how is it that he wasn't stopped by the police sometime before that? If he, as we're told, was under the influence of drugs or something, he was clearly driving erratically. I just find it astonishing that he managed to get as far as he got.
Well, the how and the why question runs very deep for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think one of my other how and why questions is, how is it within a cordoned off public space on such a significant day that parked cars were allowed to stay there in the first place?
Yeah.
Because if you've got your car in the area and if you are high on drugs, and I'm not speculating, I know there's speculation about that. If you've got your car keys and you can access the vehicle, you shouldn't be able to access the vehicle. There should have been road closures well in advance. You know, if your car is here after 5 o'clock tomorrow, it will be towed away.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying this is what we do, in London, which much to everybody's annoyance, actually, is, the roads get closed for the London Marathon. You can't drive down those. You can't walk down some of them. You can't even cross them if there's people running there. They're completely carless.
Yeah, let alone be able to park a car in advance of it and then be able to get back into it and drive off in the middle of the parade. Can I say, one thing, though? The police response was nothing more than short of magnificent. Yeah. And the local Coast Guard, which were obviously on duty in the river, because the Strand is right next to the river, as anyone knows, they came in. I saw the Coast Guard running in. That response was incredible, absolutely incredible how they managed it.
Sure. And when you got your children finally home, how are they doing now?
Well, I'm one of those people. I've been a foster carer for 20 years and I've adopted 5 children. So all of my children have gone through trauma in their lives historically. Yeah. So for an event like this, I'm not saying it's even more traumatic, but certainly the foundation isn't as strong there when they're faced with something as like this. Yeah. So my 2 girls were hysterical, and my son, who was just magnificent. He was a young leader, and I told him that.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that you were able to find your way out of it as well, and a terrible experience for you all. But Sue, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye-bye. Sue Wright there, a businesswoman whose office is literally up the road from where this all happened, and who, as she said, was walking around the city for about 8 miles trying to get around and about and trying to get her kids safe. And an awful lot of people will have resonated with what she had to say, because it's awful, especially when you have your children with you and you need to try and get them to a place of safety. And of course, when something like that happens, the first assumption is that it's a terrorist attack. The police and the questions about the police and their behaviour and why they released the information they did as quickly as they did has raised as many questions as it's in fact answered. Let's get a voice note from Patrick.
Hiya, Mike. It's Patrick in East Yorkshire. Starmer's at it again. You can add it to your flip-flops. When it was Southport, there was no press release or anything, and Starmer said it would affect the jury and prejudice the trial. But when it happens in Liverpool, he says it's a matter for the police. What's going on?
Yeah. He also said, did he not, that he was being kept abreast of all developments, which again, he denied having the information from Southport. And the problem is, again, you've got the police saying one thing and doing another. And that is very, very problematic. When most people see a car driving into a crowd nowadays, because of the way things are in the rest of the world and because it's happened here before, people assume it's a terrorist attack. But because it wasn't a terrorist attack, they told us who it was. And that's the irony. Had it been a terrorist attack, they probably wouldn't have told us. And that's the problem. Coming up to 7:33.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:33. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Morning, Mike, says Nan in Wales. I watched Farage yesterday. He's talking our language. He listens. He knows what the people want for this country, and for those very reasons, he will get that support, regardless as to what the economists say. I think we need this desperately. I think you're absolutely right, Nan. And that is the bit that people do not get. They're always constantly trying to belittle Nigel Farage. They're always trying to put him down, trying to make out he doesn't know what he's doing, trying to make out he doesn't have any plans, that his plans, if he does have them, aren't any good, that if they are any good, they can't be costed. If they haven't been costed, they won't cost. They'll be impenetrable, and we'll lose loads and loads of money because it'll be bad for the exchequer. You know, they just everything they throw at him. It's the same as Donald Trump. You know, resulted in Donald Trump winning his second presidential term. Let's talk now, though, to Rupert Bell, talks of royal correspondent. Lots of pictures on the front pages this morning. Rupert, very good morning to you, of King Charles over in Canada defending the Commonwealth. I'm not sure he's on the right footing here. Some people are being a bit dismissive of his rather, shall we say, political leanings on this one.
A very difficult area to navigate for him, it was, Mike, because it's like the state opening of Parliament here. You're basically reading a script prepared by whichever government, the government of the day. And the same in Canada with Mark Carney's government. Obviously, he, as the head of state, goes to do the state opening of Parliament. He's obviously reading a script that has been cleared by and produced by Mark Carney's team. And it was always going to be a difficult one, given the sensibilities of relations with Donald Trump now, who was saying he wants to turn it into a 51st state.
Right.
So it was always going to be very difficult. But I think he certainly seemed to chime correctly with the Canadians, who were very happy to see him there reading out and saying, that what a strong nation Canada is. He used the phrase, instead of what he would do in this country, my government, the government. So that was differentiating. So you could see that he was trying to make sure that it wasn't entirely his words. It was the words of the Canadian government. And I think that was the very difficult sort of a tightrope he had to walk. And I think in the main, he's got away with it. But I think, the interesting thing is, will there be any reaction from Donald Trump, seeing the king, who he obviously says he gets on well with, putting his penny's worth into the Canadian situation? But as head of state, he's fully entitled to do so, is the king.
Let's have a look at what he actually said.
Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect. All Canadians can give themselves far more than any foreign power on any continent can ever take away.
Yes, I mean, I see what you mean. He's almost talking about the Canadians in the third person, isn't he? As opposed to we're all one and the same.
Yes, and I think that's where he's had to go with this, because yes, he's very proud and loves going to Canada, been there many times. His mother opened the Parliament, I think, in 1957, the first time she did it. So there's a very strong bond between the royal family and Canada, and I think that's the significant point, and why it was a whistle-stop tour. I mean, he's in and out of the country in 24 hours, but he was pretty busy. But I think the important thing was he was there for the state opening and sort of confirming his position as the head of state and making Canada feel that they're not doing this on their own. And Mark Carney, obviously former Bank of England governor, presumably knows the king well anyway. So I think the positive review from Canadians, the king can come back to this country knowing he's negotiated the political minefield that is currently between Canada and the United States quite successfully.
Yes, indeed. Of course, some might have said, wouldn't it be nice if, since he's on the same continent as his estranged son, he could have met up with him at some point, maybe popped over to Vancouver. They could have had a sort of neutral territory scenario, but Harry decided in his wisdom to go to a sustainable environmental travel conference in China.
Yes, and China, well known for its strong views on environmental issues.
Oh, yes.
Look, I've just been to Shanghai myself, and
Have you?
look, it's I covered a show jumping event there.
Very nice.
No, it's amazing city, but I'd have to say, him going again, taking headlines away because he went under the cover of darkness, and then he pops up talking at his Travelist conference, which is the part of sustainable travel, but. You know, China does. Maybe he's thinking, well, we've got to go to China because we've got to try and teach them what I believe in. But it again is showing that sometimes he doesn't always read the environmental room correctly by hopping onto a plane and travelling quite a long distance from California to China, and him too going in pretty quickly as well, in and out visit. But again, taking away some of the headlines from the king, who was actually doing the most important job of his reign, and one of the most significant moments in his reign by opening the Parliament in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, he didn't have to go all that way. I mean, I haven't checked the mileage, but I'm assuming that's about a 12-hour flight or something like that. I don't even know if he went on a commercial plane. But, you know, surely if it's a sustainable travel summit, everybody should not go to the actual summit. Isn't that the point?
I assume. Well, I don't. I'm trying to work out sustainable travel. If you're travelling, you're already. It's what you do at the end. I suppose it's what happens at the destination that is environmentally friendly. That, I think, is the object of the exercise. And what they're trying to do is that countries, when it comes to tourism, try and make sure it is as sustainable as is possible. You obviously, you know, if you say you can't travel, then that's going to kill off another part of the. Every country depends on tourism. We're no exception. We definitely, London needs tourists as much as anybody to keep the restaurants, the theatres, you name it, going. But it's a question that for Harry, how does he? This is all part of his new look, trying to make sure that he seems relevant. And this is one of the few things that he's still involved with that seems to be keeping him on the road a little bit. And he's
anything to keep him away from the wife, I suppose. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we?
Well, I'll tell you what. I had to listen to the podcast yesterday, Mike. I sort of get a call. Any chance you talking about the podcast? You really are mean. I don't know what. You must have said to your producer, what's Rupert doing today? Make him listen to the final episode of Confessions of a Female Founder. And I'll tell you how it began.
All right.
Because it was a Zoom call between this lady who's a very successful businesswoman. She's run Spanx, she's opened up and doing brilliant work. But it begins because they're obviously doing a Zoom call. And Meghan's obviously got a shaft of light coming onto her. And this lady says to her, "Oh, I'm being interviewed by an angel."
Oh, God.
And I quote, and you go, "Oh, my goodness me." I mean, if that is not blowing the proverbial, making Meghan feel all about Meghan, and I'm sorry, this lady would have plenty to say, and she did. I mean, I listened to it all, and she's very interesting. But it always seemed to come full circle about what Meghan was thinking. And if you look now, as ever, she's gone from, every product on the As Ever site is sold out. Now she's saying she may not be wanting to sell jam anymore. So she is not got the Midas touch when it comes to launching businesses at the moment. Because all these things require incredible hard work and commitment. And at the moment, and what was also very evident in this podcast, how important family was to the lady being interviewed, and her father really helped her with her business, her brother, her mother.
Right.
Meghan hasn't got any of that, and that seemed to stand out to me because Meghan's got no family to turn to, so apart from her husband.
Right.
And
well, that's because she's broken off with all of them. You'll be pleased to know, Rupert, I've got a little snippet here from Confessions of a Female Founder. This is the final episode. Here we go.
For a lot of people, not being able to buy into the hope or the promise of something more for themselves and financial freedom. I think so many women, especially, we're taught to not even talk about money. And there's lots of guilt mentality surrounding having a lot, and then at the same time there's a scarcity mindset that it's easy to attach to, of like, I'll never have enough. And I think if you're able to, in your 20s, with all the noise that surrounds, that you were just able to get so quiet and clear, it's profound.
Thank you.
Yeah, super. What was that even about? There's a scarcity issue. You haven't got
no,
money. If you got too much money, you're guilty. I
well,
mean, do me a favour.
and it's the earnest way she asks these questions that is so gag-inducing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How about this, though? She also told US business magazine Fast Company, this is Meghan, that she wouldn't know what to call myself. Right? I got a couple of ideas.
Well, yes, because she doesn't know whether she's an entrepreneur, a showbiz celebrity. What is she?
How about she's none of the above? I think she would be called in, when I used to go and hang around in the sort of parts of Los Angeles that she used to hang around in, she's one of those actress, model, whatevers. She's an AMW.
I think, yes, but part of her problem is she's launching these products, they're not working. Netflix say they want to have a redo the deal, and a third series of the cooking program is likely to be commissioned. We see the next one in the autumn. I don't know where it's going to go. Look, it's the series is over.
Bin, I should think.
The podcast series. She's now done 2 podcast series, which have to say haven't been successful as perhaps they had hoped to be, because Meghan doesn't always makes it about her.
Yeah.
And the point of a good podcast, if you have a guest, it should be about that individual and give them the absolute to grab the stories and the headlines from what her guest is saying, rather than make every headline seems to be about Meghan, what she's saying, and her journey.
Yeah, I know.
Which someone needs to tell her. Look, you've got to turn it round. Make it about the individual, then you might start getting less negative headlines.
Yeah, I think it's very good advice, Rupert. Well played. Thank you. Well, let's talk about China again next time we have you on. I'd like to find out more about that. Rupert Bell talks royal correspondent, put himself through the torture of watching or listening to Confessions of a Female Founder from Meghan, talking to Sarah Blakely about money. Let's talk to Sarah from Northamptonshire instead. Sarah, very good morning to you.
Good morning, nice to have you back.
Very good to be back.
Missed your dulcet tones. Right, children, well, I kind of blame, this is speaking for me, okay? I have 7, okay, and the majority all are over 20.
Right.
I kind of taught them out, whereas my parents, who were born in the 30s, 40s, if you didn't have a kid time you were 20, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, right.
But these days, and I'll be honest with you, when my kids meet someone, us parents, we tell them, we say, what do you want to have a kid for? What? Do you want to end up like me? Go and live your life.
Yes.
You can't afford a child. Your rent is £800. What are you going to do? Stick a kid in a flat. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So us parents, we've got more knowledge and we've been there. And the kids look and think, yeah, we don't want that life.
Right.
And I think Nigel said something about 2 parents. That's really rare for 2 parents to stick together.
Yeah. It is really
what
rare.
I'm saying?
I mean, most people don't get married now already, but half of the people that do get married get divorced. So that leaves you with people sticking together maybe about a quarter of the time or something.
And that lady, that lovely lady you were just talking to about the Liverpool thing, she said she adopted 5 children.
Yeah.
And I tell my children, there's too many unwanted children. Go live your life.
Yeah.
My children are out the country earning money, and I say, earn your money, go on holiday. They're in Dubai, Jamaica. They're never all in the country at the same time.
Right.
It's not that people don't want children. They can't afford it. And it was, they made you basically have kids in your 20s. Have kids, have families, have
But
this.
will some of your kids maybe regret not having them if they don't?
No, they're going to have them, but I had my last one at 40.
Okay.
And they've seen how much easier it was for me, how much more stable I was.
Yeah.
And they want to do it at the other end. But if they do, and I know this is mean, if they meet someone that's got children, I'm like, what are you doing with them?
Yeah.
What they've just left kids. So I think us parents now, not like my mum, go and have a child. We say, don't be so silly. And we're strong because we've been through it. And 2 of my daughters have seen my eldest daughter have kids young at the same time as me.
Yeah.
And they've gone, it's not all about, fancy buggies. Because when a baby comes in the front door, love generally goes out the back door for the majority.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. Go on.
The other quick point is it's easier to get rid of a baby these days than a cold.
Yeah.
You can get over losing a baby. People take the tablet, which is so easy to get. I do know people that have done it. There should be a limit on that and everything.
You think it's too easy?
There's no stigma attached.
Yeah.
They'll wake up and go, I'm pregnant. Get a pill. Back
no, it's a good point. It's a good point. Sarah, listen, thank you very much indeed. Great call. Very interesting. Loads of different points in that one, yeah. People waiting longer to have children, people not having kids because it's easier not to have them. If you do get pregnant, it's easier to become unpregnant, if you like. I suppose what Nigel Farage should really do if he wants to attract the people who want to have lots of children is get Boris Johnson involved. Boris Johnson became a dad again over the last few days, and he was his fourth child with Carrie, a girl called Poppy. He's already got 4 grown-up children with his second wife, Marina, and another daughter from an affair, I think. So that's 9 we think we've got so far. So he's certainly doing his bit for the old childbirth society. Coming up, we're going to speak, though, to Ben Pyle, writer and co-founder of Climate Debate UK. We've got lots to talk to about with him, not least the fact that electric cars keep going on fire, and there's a congestion charge increase coming in London. Marvellous, isn't it? This is talk.
Aspirational, I suppose, rather than a prophecy. I'm not trying to say that I definitely know for sure. I'm suggesting or making the argument that so many major things have happened that the woke movement, as we've known it, is coming to an end. There's too many things. There's the Supreme Court ruling saying that biological sex in the Equality Act means biological sex. There's the Cass review, which led to the puberty blockers being banned. We've had DEI being stripped out of major corporations across the world. The election of Trump and him saying, you know, with these executive orders regarding men, no more men in women's prisons, no more men in women's sports.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Back from a few days away. Dubai, I was in, which must have the carbon footprint of a small planet. But that's, of course, the paradox, isn't it, of what they call sustainable travel, because you get to the hotel and they say, if you want to preserve the environment, perhaps don't put your towels in to be washed every day. Well, yeah, OK then. What about the thousands of pounds worth of electricity you're using and by the minute to make sure that everybody stays nice and cool in the building? That's another story. Craig says this: I just received our 6 monthly water bill from Bournemouth Water and Wessex Water, who provide our water and our sewage service. Bournemouth Water is a 32% increase and Wessex Water is a 21% increase. So much for 3% inflation. Yeah, absolutely right. Let's get a quick voice note from Gavin on cannabis.
So, the cannabis thing. Okay, so now everyone's going to bang on about this and say how bad it is and all those things like that. Quite honestly, people that have smoked cannabis, and of course I have in the past, or of course I have, there's no domestic abuse. There's very, very little of that. You know, I would rather them focus on dealing with the migrant problems and use the tax that they can generate from selling cannabis to deal with those problems. You know, I would rather see a pub converted into a facility selling legalized cannabis than seeing it full of migrants who are going to be harassing girls and doing things like this. It's just all backwards.
OK, that's one point of view, Gavin. I mean, Peter Hitchens will have a different point of view to that. We'll be speaking to him, no doubt, about it tomorrow. I think it's wrong to say that, you know, all cannabis is good and all alcohol is bad. I think that's obviously far too polarised. I think in the end, you ought to be a bit more nuanced than that. And there are some people who get psychotic when they smoke cannabis. There are some people who do stupid stuff when they're drunk. You know, the point is that regulation is all about getting the balance right, and I don't think Sadiq Khan will get the balance right, because he doesn't get the balance right about anything else. Ben Pyle is here, writer and co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Ben, very good morning to you.
Good morning, mate.
Good to see you, sir. I mean, Sadiq Khan in the news for the cannabis debate, but I mean, he's generally speaking in the news for much else besides, including deciding to put the London congestion charge up 20%. To £18. I was talking to a driver this morning who said, well, that's going to cripple an awful lot of professional drivers because, you know, yet again, he doesn't care about them. It's going to go, so what, £15 extra a week?
I make it, but I don't know how much extra it is a week or a year or a day. I think it sounds small, only £3 extra a day, but over the course of a year, that's the better part of £4,000. I think it's £3,900 if you're driving 5 days a week in London. So that's it. You know, you might be a roofer, you might be a plumber, electrician, or, you know, I mean, these are just these costs are adding on and on and on to all of the other expenses that people in London experience, like the ever rising rent increases and the other costs of living.
Right.
You know, the cost of the supermarket shop is going up, and of course you won't be able to drive to your supermarket and home again if you're facing these increasing costs. And I think people talk a good game about how it's going to improve London, but if you're on one side of the river, for example, and your family that you've moved from because the prices are rising, or on the other, public transport is not really an option for you. That's going to be, you know, those congestion charges are going to go up. But I mean, imagine dragging a family of 4 or 5 through the tube system or on the buses to go and see grandma on the other side of the river once or twice a week. These are enormous costs that in a normal city you just be able to jump in a car. And I had a look this morning, and I was like, well, how much does it cost now to sort of travel around London? If you're a family of 4, 2 adults are going to pay £2,568 a year each for a zones 1 to 4 travel card, and 2 kids over the age of 11, they're going to be paying £1,284 each. So the family of 4 each year is going to have to fork out £7,704 just to travel around in zones 1 to 4.
Which is an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, I used to just, you know, try not because it was convenient, because I would work normal hours, which I don't do anymore. But it would cost me just to use the tube and the bus system and I only live about 2 miles away from work. And obviously, occasionally I go somewhere else. It's about £200 a month, easy.
I think people in London, if they're not able to live there because of benefits, they're being moved out, and they're certainly being priced off the road. You know, Greens, they talk a good game about this, all the benefits of green living, you know, cleaner air and healthy streets and what have you. But the fact is, they're just creating these kind of 2 tiers of population in London. People who have just moved here from other countries, and people on benefits, versus very, very wealthy people. And those people have been subsidised by the Green, you know, by policies lobbied for by the Green blob. You know, so you could get huge discounts on electric vehicles through subsidy schemes funded by, you know, from public money, from taxpayers. And then you'd have a subsidised car parking space for your EV in central London, and you'd get discounts on the congestion charge and other stuff. So it was rewarding people who were on salaries of £100,000 plus per year to come and sort of to have basically a free car. And free fuel, while everyone else was sort of forced onto buses that weren't working properly, and a very overcrowded underground system, which is basically equivalent to what people used to pay in rent just to move around the city.
Exactly right. And I think I'm right in saying that this new congestion charge, when it kicks in next year, will also have a fee for driving an electric vehicle as well, because they're going to start charging them, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they're going to pull the plug. I mean, the whole green agenda
pull the plug.
pull the rug and pull the plug on. You obey what the Greens tell you to do one year, and the next year they just put the fines on to you. So everyone, you know, people with money thought, oh, we're going to be green and we're going to get off all these extra charges. And then of course the likes of Sadiq Khan said, well, you're next. And people don't realise about this insidious nature of the green agenda. It's always coming for you. You know, and then you go on the buses. They'll cancel the buses eventually. You know, once they've cut the emissions from the EVs, once they've chucked all the old petrol cars off the road, Then it'll be the buses.
Then it'll
Someone
be
will
the
say,
buses next, yeah.
Yeah, there'll be some study from Imperial College or something saying buses are destroying the polar bears.
Yeah,
again.
of course, something like that. Or maybe electric buses are so heavy they're ruining the roads. Maybe that's an idea. How about this? I'll just leave you with one thought. I came back from Dubai yesterday, which is not exactly the green capital of the world, but I got into my car, drove back home from Heathrow, because it's actually cheaper to park the car there while I was on holiday than it would be to get a taxi or to mess around with trains and all the rest of it. So driving back on the M4, I entered a clean air zone just as I came out of Heathrow Airport, despite the fact that there's planes dumping, aviation fuel everywhere, and there's all sorts of pollution from the airport. The motorway is reduced to 50 miles an hour because it's a clean air zone. How ridiculous is that?
Well, I think they want to stop people being able to afford to get to the airport, because Sadiq Khan knows he can't really do anything about planes.
Yeah.
So it's an attempt to sort of increase the costs to make people choose other airports.
Yeah.
I mean, Sadiq Khan's a green fanatic. Or if he's not himself a green fanatic, he is completely surrounded.
He's surrounded by an awful lot of them, yeah. Absolutely. Listen, Ben, we've got to run. We're out of time, but thank you. Very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. This is Morning Glory. Back after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, now, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, coming up to 3 minutes past 8. It's good to be back, ladies and gentlemen. There's plenty to be getting along with. Keir Starmer doesn't seem to have got any better since I've been away. As you can see, if you're watching the show, there is a Morning Glory podcast, comes out every single day. You get it right after this show finishes. Very, very efficient stuff, I tell you what. Much more efficient than this government. We'll be talking about why Keir Starmer still has all kinds of problems all over the place, not least his latest plan, which is to release a load of violent prisoners and people who may have been sex offenders, domestic abusers, burglars, rapists, killers, you know, maybe not killers, but certainly an awful lot of very serious criminals, because you don't get into prison anymore unless you are a serious criminal. But on the front page of the Times today, it says basically that the MI5, the National Crime Agency and the Metropolitan Police have all expressed concern that if people are let out of prison, it might be, in their words, a net detriment to public safety. Oh, really? Do you think? Well, actually allowing bad criminals back into society might not be very good for the safety of those of us who are law-abiding. Well, of course it's not a good idea. Of course it's a bad idea. And of course it's a net detriment to public safety. In other words, don't do it, Keir. It's a mistake. But, of course, he's also been told by 6 separate police chiefs writing in the Times today that they cannot do any of the things that he says he wants to do, i.e. having knife crime halved, having violence against women and girls halved, appointing 13,000 additional frontline police officers, all of that, even maybe thrown in a few police dogs. No, can't do any of that. Haven't got any money. They say they need serious investment, which, of course, they don't have, because Rachel Reeves has spent all the money that we did have and has thrown away the rest of it paying off the debt that she's borrowed since she's been in. In April alone, they borrowed £20 billion, let me tell you, which means that there isn't anything left in the kitty, I'm afraid, for the police. So meanwhile, of course, the small boats continue to come. Look at that statistic there, 36,567 illegal migrants having crossed the channel under Keir Starmer's watch. It's going to be 50,000 before the end of the year, I'm sure, because Keir Starmer has no control over it. He's not doing anything at all. Meanwhile, we're going to follow up on the story in Liverpool. Of course, a man has been arrested on the suspicion of attempted murder, driving into a crowd of people as Liverpool fans celebrated their team winning the Premier League. Here's what Liam's got to say.
Good morning, Mike. Liam in Folkestone. Now, what I think Merseyside police have done is they've created a rod for their own back by saying he was white, 53 and British. If there's an inevitable terrorist attack in the future, we want to know their age, their ethnicity and where they're from. Do you think that they'll be doing that anytime soon? I don't think so, do you?
Well, we know that they won't be doing that because the Metropolitan Police here in London have got a current situation that they're dealing with where 3 Jewish schoolboys were attacked on Hampstead Tube by a group of men, as described. We don't know who that group of men were. We haven't had a description of them yet. I wonder why that could be. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And one from Becky here in Devon. We're going to speak to Esther McVey in a moment, who obviously has got a big interest in what happens in Liverpool. She's got the Tatton constituency, which is not a million miles from Liverpool either. But just before we talk to you, Esther, let me just read you this, because Nigel Farage thinks we should be having more children. Becky from Devon sent me this, and it's very well thought through, so let me read it to you. I'm currently pregnant with my first baby at 36. I'll be 37 when I give birth. We will most likely just be having one baby, as I'm the main breadwinner, but also self-employed. Like much of our generation, due to freelancing and the rise of the internet. Self-employed maternity allowance is so confusing and strange. Plus, I can only take 3 months off with that before I'll have to go back to work because it's not anywhere near what I can make. This is why hard-working couples will have 0 to 1 children. Simply, it's too hard. I think persuading and making it easier for people like me to have 1 or 2 instead of 0 or 1 would be the best way to do it, as I can't see hard-working couples having more than 2 children anyway, as they want careers. So removing the cap won't help, and that's, of course, the 2 children benefit cap, which Nigel Farage has come out and said he's actually in favour of. Let's talk to Esther McVey, though, and see what she makes of it. Well, Esther, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I mean, it's a big issue, this, isn't it? Because we've been talking for a long time about the falling birth rate in this country, and many people have made the argument, sometimes in the Conservative Party, we have to employ more people from abroad. We have to import more people from abroad to do the jobs that we're not doing because we haven't got any kids growing up to do them. Do you agree with him that we should have more kids?
I think we need to separate out all the issues here from the cap on 2 children in the benefit system to people choosing or choosing not to have children. Yeah. I think the caller put it right. They've chosen that. It's through work, through circumstance. And a lot of women are choosing not to have children. And I am one of those women. I didn't have children. I thought it was responsible that I didn't if I was pursuing a career, living between several places. So I believed I was doing the most responsible thing as a woman and as a citizen. So I won't be telling anybody what to do. Equally, I don't really think it is for Nigel Farage to be telling women what they should be doing either. But if it's a big discussion that the whole of the country should be having, I don't have a problem with that as well. What is it that is limiting women's desires to have children? For me, it was the pursuit of a career.
Yes. I mean, I suppose some people would say, is it about the government offering incentives, for example? I mean, I remember when I was growing up, my parents both worked, and so my mum was a teacher, which was quite an easy, well, not an easy job, but an easier job, if you like, if you're going to be a mother, because they get quite a lot of time off, and, you know, you can see your kids in your own school and all that kind of thing. But they used to have a thing, I think, called a married tax allowance, you know, or married couples tax allowance, which I think disappeared at some point. I'm not sure under which government it did, but that was more of an incentive to have the kids and to stay together as a married couple, or even to get married, than what we have now. And I know it all sounds a bit sort of old-fashioned and traditionalist, but wasn't that a good thing?
Oh, I agree with that. And I do agree with the notion of the family unit and sharing the tax between you. So I do think that would be a positive thing. I think the other thing that's a positive thing is bringing prices down. And that would be getting rid, for example, of net zero, bringing taxation down in its entirety, so you keep more of your own money. So absolutely. Then that gives you the choice. If you do have more money, if you do have more time together, that gives you the choice of whether you want to have a child. But like I say, there are many thought processes that go into having a child.
Yes, and for a lot of people, I suppose, I don't wish to make this sound wrong, but it's going to sound wrong however I say it. Sometimes it's sometimes it's the wrong people that have so many children, you know, and maybe because the benefit cap is there, that's not been happening quite so much, because, you know, we've all seen the sort of the you know, the sort of the estate family where you've got a woman who's got 7 different kids with 7 different dads. Inevitably, none of them are going to do terribly well at school. Inevitably, they're going to join that kind of underclass of society, and we've suffered from that as well.
Well, you need to think of why was this benefit cap for 2 children brought in. And that was because when the Conservative government and the coalition government came in, there was a burgeoning benefit bill. And people, as you say, who'd had multiple children were getting a lot more support. They were getting not just the benefit, they were also getting housing, etc. And so it was, why is it that people who were in work, who were paying the tax for others to have a benefit, they were making decisions themselves not to have children. However, on the benefit system, there was no need to think about the affordability, to think about responsibility, to think about whether you could cope, because the state was there to give you a house and to give you the benefits. And that was why, and I was part of that team who looked at this, looked at the fairness and looked at who was paying for it, all the responsible questions, and that's why the cap was brought in. I can't remember, don't know if you remember at the time, some families were getting like 10-bedroom sort of, or 10 home houses for 5 and 6 kids. And also at the end of the day, it was tens of thousands of pounds of wage. And also it was locking them into a benefit, because they could never come off benefit, because they could never have replaced that with the wage, the amount of money they were on. And that's why it came in for fairness. This is why I think Nigel Farage has made a major mistake with basically saying, I'm going to increase the benefits bill, when most people say, actually, no, we don't want that. We want a responsible society, people saying, I can afford what I'm doing, I'm paying what I'm doing, I'm paying my way. So I think this is a major mistake for Nigel Farage.
I mean, it's a bit like the immigration conversation, isn't it? I mean, you know, you don't want to have no immigration, but you also want to have the right kind of immigration, the same way that, you know, if you want to encourage people to have more children, you want them to be able to do it on their own, under their own steam. You don't want to have them to do it because other taxpayers are paying for them to have bigger families.
Yeah, and it is the whole notion of understanding what support a child needs and how you do it. It's not therefore just the finances, although that's a key and crucial part. It is about time, it is about education, it is about their needs, it is about their hobbies, their pastime. It's a whole thing, isn't it? It is the responsibility of a small human being for basically, my dad would tell me, for their entire life.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk a bit about what happened in Liverpool over the weekend, over the bank holiday weekend. A terrible, terrible tragedy. I mean, thankfully, at the moment, at least, it looks as though nobody's, suffered fatal injuries, but there's still people in hospital. A lot of questions being asked this morning about how it's possible that the driver of that Ford Galaxy could get so close to people that he was behind an ambulance, that he would have had to go through some kind of roadblock, albeit that the roadblock was moved for the ambulance. It seems amazing that nobody stopped him, doesn't it?
Yeah, unbelievable. I wasn't there. I was actually doing constituency stuff on Monday, but my dad, who is a season ticket holder and is at most of, all the home games, was there. So as soon as I saw this, I was on the phone straight away to my dad to say, where are you? Are you safe? And people will say Liverpool is a big city, but it's also a small village, and we will know lots of people there. And I could not believe the footage that I saw firstly on the internet. So I was calling people to see how they were. And you are right. How did this car get down those roads? We know it snuck in behind an ambulance, but how was it parked on the main street anyway? How did he get in there? How was he driving up the road? I mean, I think there was about 1 million people in Liverpool. Yeah. The place was absolutely cram-packed. Children, it was a family day event. My dad, elderly, I mean, the whole lot were there. And this managed to happen. So the confusion, how he managed to trail an ambulance, how he wasn't stopped, and then you saw the crowd getting angry, didn't you? What is this car doing here? And they were attacking the car. And then we hear now that he was drugged and driving. And for whatever was going on in his head, which we cannot understand, and you cannot understand somebody who's so drugged up, what his thought process was, reversing into people and then driving into people.
I know, absolutely awful situation, and of course everybody's initial thought was it's another one of these awful terrorist attacks like we've seen so often in Germany. We've had them here, we've had them in America, and unusually the police actually released information about who it was very, very quickly. But they've now kind of made a rod for their own backs, because now they're going to have to do that every time there's an incident of any kind, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Because they told a lot, didn't they? They said, white man, 53. Yeah. I mean, they told, quite a lot of information there. So you are right. We will expect, as a society, the same information coming forward for all different types of crimes.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going to have to be as quick as they were on that. But already we've got a case in London where there's been some young Jewish boys attacked by some men on a tube platform in Hampstead over the weekend. We haven't yet seen, as far as I know, a description of the assailants from the police.
Yeah, and this is where the two-tier justice, two-tier policing, two-tier sentencing comes from, because, we know about some people, we don't know about others. You're allowed to hear about some, but you can't hear about others. And all of this, what we're seeing now, this criminality on the streets, right? And this guy was a drugged-up car. Liberal views on what should happen if people are on drugs. You've got that coming from a Labour mayor, and at the same time you've got this ridiculous set of policies now from this Labour government wanting to let people out of prison and also not send people to prison. And I don't think people are quite getting the numbers here. What Labour are saying is basically half the people who would be sentenced to prison per year are not going to go. 43,000 people are not going to go to prison. And it's all kinds: burglaries, robberies, muggings, people attacking our emergency workers. This is a disgrace. This could well be the worst thing Keir Starmer does as leader, and he's done a hell of a lot wrong. Destroy the economy, destroy farmers' livelihood, businesses, but criminals on the streets in these numbers, it's a disgrace.
And we know the last time he let them all out, sort of back end of last summer, somebody was killed, a woman was sexually assaulted, there were domestic violence abusers arrested, or let out rather, without their victims being told. Many of them were recalled again anyway after they were out. The whole thing's a shambles, isn't it? They'll, of course, blame the Tories. But at the end of the day, you didn't at least let these people out.
Right, so there's a couple of things. One, you need to say, what do we need to do? And if you are saying prison isn't rehabilitating people enough, well, we do more rehabilitation. What you don't do is say, we take everybody out of prison.
Yeah.
So, there's going to be another nearly three, I think 3 prisons have now come on board. So we have got more prison places, and there's more coming on board by 2030. So the Tories did start a prison building process, but with lockdown, etc., it wasn't enough, and you need more. But I would be keeping them in prison. And you're quite right, the Tories didn't let these people out. But it's the whole set of support you would need in the community to do this, which Labour hasn't got. And let's be honest, it's not that easy to get into prison. These people, they're now saying, aren't going to come into prison. We're going to give them some sort of community, tagging or some community rehabilitation, or have you. They've already had that and reoffended.
Yeah.
I know my other half, Philip Davis, who used to be the MP for Shipley, his fascination was with justice and the criminal sentencing, and he did FOIs, and the maximum number of crimes somebody had committed and not been sent to prison was just under 700. Right? So that was the maximum, and this was an FOI. So what I'm saying is, whilst the average might be in the tens, it is not that easy to go into prison. So these people are criminals. They need to be locked away. They need to be locked away for longer and be rehabilitated, not let out on the streets.
Yeah, and if they haven't been rehabilitated, they should keep them in there, seems to me.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward, really. Brilliant stuff. Esther, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Esther McVey, former Minister for Common Sense. Still very, very commonsensical as far as I can see. Sonia says this, morning, Mike. Hope you had a lovely break. I did, thank you. I had 5 children I brought up on my own. Tax breaks won't cover these. My youngest 2 children went to childminders. In the 1990s, it was £50 a week. My 2 older children had to go to another minder, another £50. Eldest child would go along, then walk the middle 2 to school. I had bus fares to and from work, etc. I was left, even was called without child benefit for about £100 a month. I had to had that to clothe and feed us. So surely encouraging more children, even with tax relief, will cause more child poverty. I did not get child benefit for the eldest, and childcare is far more expensive now. Well, that is the problem. But of course the government, I think, are offering free breakfast clubs now. They're offering, school dinners for everybody. They're again taxing the public purse to give money to people who have children. Some of those people who have children don't need to have the money. Some of them don't need to be given it. But the system doesn't work very well. We'll come back to more on that next with Henry Hill. First, though, here's Phil with a voice note.
Earlier in the show, you were talking about cannabis and the potential legalising of cannabis and the fact that Sadiq Khan's in favour of it. And you played a clip of him saying, we need to have an open and honest conversation about it backed by science, which just made my blood boil, because Sadiq Khan was interviewed not too long ago about how many rape gangs there are in London, and somebody was trying to have an open and honest conversation with him about that, and he did nothing but try to block the subject by saying, I don't understand the question, etc., etc. So how this man can have an open and honest conversation about anything is beyond me.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Phil. And he doesn't want a full and honest and frank conversation about net zero either, or ULEZ, or indeed the clean air that he claims London has now got due to his policies. He never wants to have open and honest conversations really about anything. So the fact that he wants to have one about marijuana and cannabis would suggest that he must have been smoking some of it, wouldn't it? 8:22.
There is a north-south divide in the city, and as we, the Liberal Democrats, set out our policy platform, that's one of the things that we're going to try and bridge the gap between. You know, we need to win in the north of the city, not only because the north of the city deserve councillors that work hard for them, but because, you know, I think there was a statistic that if you get the bus from a southern part of the city to a northern part of the city, there's a certain road that you go down where your life expectancy drops by about 10 to 20 years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Coming up to very nearly 25 minutes past 8. We're going to speak to Henry Hill very shortly, who is, of course, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. We've got a big piece in The Sun this morning about why Britain does need to have more kids. We'll get stuck into that. First of all, though, here's a voice note from Mike.
Hi, Mike. It's Mike calling from the dustbin of the world. Now, why would you fine Thames Water for all the idiots that have been running it? Why wouldn't you fine the chief executives and the board members that manage it so badly? Fine them personally out of their own pay. Because if you fine the company, obviously all the people who use the water will have to pay for the fine, won't they, from their water bills? Just more madness in the dustbin of the world.
I thought you were going to add another sort of location to the dustbin of the world, like, you know, Birmingham. I know that's going to sound bad if you live in Birmingham, but because of the bin strike, I don't mean because it's horrible. But yeah, Thames Water, you're absolutely right. The trouble is they'll find them and then they will pass it on. I suppose the idea is that the regulator hopes that they might see sense and not actually pay their executives loads and loads of bonuses or give loads and loads of dividend profits to the shareholders. But of course, that's not how it works, is it? Because what they then say is, well, actually, because of all these fines, we have to go into liquidation. We're going to have to declare ourselves bankrupt, and then you'll have to rescue us. You know, and then the game goes around and around and around. It's like water going down the toilet. You know, never actually get anywhere. Anyway, let's talk to Henry Hill now, political commentator. Headline in his piece today. Nigel needs to work on the details, but he's right. Brits do need to have more kids. And there's a picture there of 4 little babies. And Britons do need to have more kids, but not everybody agrees for the reasons why. Jules says there's free breakfast clubs and cheaper childcare, but there's no available affordable homes because they are full of foreigners and working people are taxed so highly that life is unaffordable. And I think that's a big issue as well. Henry, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is a quick look at Nigel Farage, what he said about having more children.
We want to go much, much further to encourage people to have children, to make it easier for them to have children. And that is why I also believe that having a transferable tax allowance between married people is the right thing to do. Now, I know many will say, look, marriage is outdated, most people don't bother to get married anymore, and, you know, I'm hardly standing here in front of you as a religious priest and moralising. I'm not sure my own track record was ever so good on this. And we all lead imperfect lives. But what is true, what is absolutely true, and the evidence is there to prove it, is that where people who are married stay together for the longest period of time, the children that grow up in those environments have the best chance of success in life.
He says these things as though nobody's said them for a very long time, and nobody has said them for a very long time, Henry. The question, I suppose, is he right?
I mean, on the impact of raising children in marriage, that does certainly seem to be something that is attested to by the evidence. Of course, there is a chicken and egg argument about, well, if you made people who didn't want to be together stay together, would that be as healthy and happy an environment for children? But broadly speaking, children raised in a stable home with 2 parents do best. And so encouraging that to an extent if people have children makes makes perfect sense. I think the query maybe on this particular part of his proposals is simply the extent to which he's really doing that. He is proposing a tax break for married couples, but it really isn't all that big in the scope of the overall proposals that he's suggesting. I think reformers suggest saying that they'll raise the personal allowance to 20,000 per person, and then in a married couple, one will be able to claim it up to 25,000. So that is effectively, if you're a cohabiting couple, I think if you're a basic rate taxpayers, you'd be saving about £3,000. If you were a married couple, you'd be saving just under £4,000. So it's a difference, but not as vast a difference as maybe some of his rhetoric suggested it might be.
No, sure. And a lot of people telling me this morning as well, it's not simply about being given, a bit more cash, if you like, as a benefit. It might be better to be more of an incentive, for example, like it used to be the case where you would get a married couple's allowance, or you would get money as a tax break, if you like, if you had an extra child, rather than actually a benefit. You know what I mean? I know it's a subtle difference, but also people telling me this morning that a lot of people aren't having the number of children as they used to have is simply because the cost of living is so high. They can't necessarily be sure they can afford a house, and they're being squeezed out of the rental market by a lot of people coming into this country being given free housing.
Yeah, exactly. There are all sorts of reasons, but the cost of living is a really big one. And also simply the cost of getting into your own home, because if you're stuck renting, then that's a huge amount of uncertainty. You only have, you only know where you're living year to year.
Yeah.
If you're about to bring a young child into the world, you don't want to risk being forced into a smaller flat or constantly having to move around all the time.
Yeah.
So there are an enormous range of factors that go into this. But I do think that one very important thing about this, maybe the gap, I completely agree with Nigel. We do need lots more children. Fundamentally, the British state, most states, in fact, operate as a sort of Ponzi scheme, essentially, because they need people paying in to pay out the benefits to older citizens who've started to retire. And so we need those people. And if we want less immigration, which most people do, the overwhelming majority of people do, then we need people to have children. But we should be targeting those programs at working families. As you say, that could be done through a tax break. The slight irony of the current proposal is that the two-child limit only applies to people on universal credit. And so this is a proposal which won't do anything if you're a family having to make a difficult decision about whether or not you can afford a first or a second child, and you're a sort of net contributor taxpayer who pays into the economy and pays into the exchequer and pays for everything else. And those are the people who have been left out.
And it's the working poor again, isn't it? And I know that, as you say, I mean, some of the benefit system in this country is supposed to help the working poor, but it sort of doesn't really. It helps a section of them. But the most difficult place to be, it seems to be, in this country is to be just high enough paid to be above the threshold for getting help from the government, but not actually well enough off to be able to afford to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Only about 1/3 of British adults are actually net contributors to the economy in general. So there is to the tax man in general, and those people carry an enormous burden. And the most interesting thing is, sometimes when we talk about having more babies, there's concerns in some quarters that it's people talking about forcing women to have children that they don't want to have and all the rest of it. But this country has a quite clear baby gap, which is the difference between the average birth rate that we currently have, which is 1.49, and the number of children that British women say that they'd like to have. Now, according to the latest research that I've seen, more than 80% of British women who responded to it said that they wanted at least 2 children. So actually, there's a clear failure here in that we have British people who want to have families, who want to have larger families than they end up with, and they're not being able to have them. And we need policy interventions that are aimed at making that more possible. And not all of them will cost money. There's a lot of debate about the cost of some of these policies, and some of them are expensive. But deregulating childcare, not completely deregulating it, having CRB checks and so on is fine, but getting rid of some of the absurd requirements we've freighted onto that in recent years, making a childcare credit into something which parents can spend more flexibly rather than only spending on government-approved providers, which is making everything very expensive. Those would actually be cost neutral. and they could hugely give more flexibility to parents. So there are all kinds of things we can do. Hopefully, Farage's announcements today are just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, indeed. I'll leave you with this final 20 minutes ago tweet from the Prime Minister. I'm going to call this his lie of the day, because he does at least one or two of these every single day. Working people deserve to realise the dream of owning their own home. My government is taking action to make this happen. Local builders will face simpler rules, faster decisions and less red tape, helping them get on with building the homes that communities need. Well, sounds good, doesn't it?
It sounds absolutely amazing until you actually see the detail of what Labour is proposing. They're basically, this is true for small developers of up to 9 houses. Small developments, they've created a simpler rule system, but what they're proposing for big developments is absolutely mad.
Yeah.
They're proposing effectively that councils will be able to decide how quickly a developer should build out, and then are completely free to do that without any control from the government.
Yeah.
And then if the developer fails to do that, they can seize the land and refuse to take further planning applications from that developer. So it's on the one hand, for tiny developments, yep, Starmer's got your back. For big ones, the Labour government's proposing to make it just about impossible to build them. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is, along with everything else they're doing. Great to talk to you, Henry. Great piece in the paper today. Thank you. Henry Hill, political commentator. Big piece in page 12 of The Sun this morning. Listen, actually, next to their leader on open justice, in which they talk about the very rapid release of the information surrounding the assailant up there in Liverpool, and how quickly they released the information that he was a white 53-year-old British man. Interesting. They now say, having now embraced transparency, the public will not understand why they shouldn't always be given the full picture by the cops, whatever that may be. Absolutely right. Let's talk to Angie, who's in Plymouth, who says she's a stay-at-home mum and she's very happy about it. Angie, very good morning to you.
Oh, good morning, Mike. I'm now a stay-at-home grandmother, actually.
How are you? Excellent. Well done. How many kids have you got?
Well, I got married very young to my wonderful husband, who has been married to a very patient man, Steve.
Yeah.
And we had 6 children in 8 years.
Right.
And I do totally agree with Nigel Farage, actually, that the child benefit allowed me to stay at home with our children till all of them went to school and instill the values that we wanted to instill in them about good behaviour, etc., and responsibility. All our youngest child is handicapped, but he still goes out and does voluntary work and things like that. But all our 5 other children are fully employed and are paying their taxes. They've all got children themselves.
Right.
And, and I just do think that actually what I did was I stayed at home until our youngest was in school.
Right.
And then I did my degree and then taught for 22 years. And now I'm happily retired and helping. And now I am a stay-at-home granny, but I do look after my grandchildren.
So you can do childcare as well now?
I do childcare now.
Which is a massive thing for so many mothers. I know this because, you know, it was the case in my own family. It's really difficult. I mean, if you've got, second generation, you've got a grandmother or grandparent around, it's fantastic. But I guess a lot of people don't have that.
No, I didn't have it.
Right.
because my husband, my late mother-in-law was wonderful, but she actually had 5 children herself, but had them all spread out than us.
Right.
And so she still had 2 young kids at home. So, but I didn't mind that. And what I'm saying is I don't think women should be forced into pressurised into going to work. And I do also think that actually having children would be a lot cheaper. One of my children said to me on his wedding day, he said, I want to thank my mum for giving us a Walt Disney childhood. Now, we were on one wage. My husband was a yardie in the dockyard.
Yeah.
He was on £200 a week, okay?
Right.
And he was made redundant twice, but we still managed to keep going. And I think that actually stay at home, cooking your own food. You're a great cook. I use a lot of your recipes. I just do think that, cooking at home, using fresh stuff is a lot cheaper than buying all this stuff, and I just do feel that.
Totally.
Sorry, the other thing I was going to say was that my younger daughter, Emma, and my beloved son-in-law, Simon, and my 2 beloved grandsons were actually at the Liverpool.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, they were actually at the thing. They were absolutely terrified.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, we were out on bank holiday, so we didn't know about it. But then my husband, Steve, worked with a newspaper, so he was going in. He does the newspaper delivery, and so he went in. They said, "Oh, you know, have you heard what's happened in Liverpool?" I'd already gone to bed, so I didn't find out until I woke up the next morning. But we were absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't know whether they were safe or not until my daughter contacted me to let me know that they were okay.
Thank goodness.
It just, thank goodness, but awful for the people that have been injured.
Totally. Listen, Angie, I really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Really interesting to hear from Angie there, who was a stay-at-home mum, but not for the whole time. She also worked as well, but now she's a stay-at-home grandma, and that can be a big help to people who need childcare but who can't pay through the nose for it. Loads more coming up, including Philip Ingram coming next on Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:40. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, we are running a little bit late this morning, so we're going to rush through some things here, including, speaking to Mike Neville coming up about Liverpool. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, is here now because we're hearing that Russia is readying troops for a long war with Ukraine as 50,000 troops are massing on the border. We've seen as well some evidence that Russia has been sort of upping their attacks on various cities in Ukraine as well. Philip, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Last time I was here, it seemed as though there was still some hope that there might be peace talks sort of, you know, surmising themselves somewhere in Turkey. There were people talking to each other, but that all seems to have drifted away into the mists of time now, doesn't it?
It does. I think the reality is of what Vladimir Putin is doing is coming to Donald Trump very clearly. You know, we had Donald Trump, you know, at the beginning of the week turn around and call Vladimir Putin crazy. Yeah. Trump's Prime Minister and our former Prime Minister, and now in his Security Council, Medvedev, turned around and threatened World War III. And then we've just had the US General, who's liaison to Zelensky in Kyiv last night, turn around and say what Medvedev is doing is irresponsible. I think the blinkers are coming off, and Donald Trump is getting a real view that Putin has never wanted peace.
Yes. And I mean, as far as the damage that could be, you know, now sort of laid bare on Ukraine, if this is to be a long war and it is to be 50,000 more troops sort of pumped into the system, I mean, what's the latest situation with the Ukrainian troops? Have they got enough troops to fight back?
Ukrainians have. No side's ever going to have enough troops, and I think, you know, the build-up that we're hearing of 50,000 Russians to attack in from the north, I think is probably more bluff than bluster, because if the Russians had 50,000 troops, they'd put them in the east and try and advance much more quickly. We're now getting these attacks between different cities. You know, the Ukrainians launched a massive drone attack on Russia last night, hitting a number of their military factories, including ones that are manufacturing drones. The Russians are firing tens of drones and soon to be hundreds of drones into Ukraine overnight, and there's predictions that it'll soon get to 1,000 drones a night that Russia can fire in. The war is escalating; it's not diffusing, and you know, the potential for the ceasefire and peace negotiations have been a distraction from that. Putin is making his position very clear indeed.
Yeah, he really is. And so, has the kind of peace plan just fallen by the wayside? Is that the end of it?
I don't think it's the end of it. You know, both sides are still talking-ish we're waiting for what Donald Trump's going to say next on Truth Social as to what the next line is. We heard a couple of days ago the new German Chancellor Merz turn around and say that the range restrictions and the use restrictions on Western weapons have been removed completely. So that's the UK-French Storm Shadow Scalp missile, the German Taurus missile, which we don't know if it's been provided yet, and the US ATACMS missiles. We will know if that is true whenever we first see them being used inside Russian territory.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary stuff, but we'll keep an eye on it all. Philip, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer there with the latest on Ukraine, which is not particularly encouraging for those people who think peace is coming anytime soon. One here from Dave in Melton Mowbray. Morning, Mike. Great show as per normal. You're on about low emission zones. Me and a friend of mine drove down to Hounslow recently to go to Twickenham to watch the Army versus Navy rugby. And I get back last week and I've got 2 fines for 180 quid. Didn't even realise the ultra low emission zone went out that far towards Heathrow. Oh well, that was an expensive trip. I'll go by train next time. All the best. Yeah, except you go by train only to find that, the train is a rail replacement service. I saw the first nationalised train from South West Rail went off the other day, and it turns out that part of the journey was for a rail replacement bus service. Well, if that's the future of nationalisation, thanks very much, but no thanks, I think you'll find. Chris in Bishop's Waltham said, my son goes through phases of using cannabis. It makes our lives a misery. When he is on it, he's unstable, aggressive, violent and abusive. I don't recognise this narrative that it makes people nicer. No, I don't think many people would. It's 8:44.
Nigel Farage's promises add up to over £100 billion. £100 billion, that is Liz Truss times 2.5. And he has not the first idea how he's going to pay for any of these promises. So he stands there on these stages and at rallies, throwing out all these promises. I'm going to spend extra money on this, I'm going to cut that tax. All these promises, well over £100 billion. Nigel Farage has never been in government, hasn't had to explain a record. He's making those promises without having any idea how to deliver them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, and we are back. I've been away. I'm going to tell you some stories about that, some matters arising from that, in what can only be described as the carbon capture capital of the world. I mean, they do some incredible things in Dubai, but one of the things they don't do, particularly, I presume, is a very, very green agenda, because they've literally got so many buildings there, so many buildings going up as well, and they do not have a congestion zone. They do not ask people to pay in order to drive in a low emissions environment, and they basically say, if you want something, you pay for it. You want a boat, you want a jet plane, you want to put a rocket up, just do it. We've got the wherewithal. It's a successful place. It doesn't feel like it's failing, unlike this country. Let's listen to what Lisa's got to say about congestion charge.
Morning, Mike. It's Lisa from Canterbury regarding this London congestion charge increasing 20%. The way I can see London going, I think we should just all have some tuk-tuks in there. We can get probably 5 or 10 people in there, and we can all travel around together in a tuk-tuk, because it's looking half like that anyway. Thank you. Bye.
It is, as long as you don't get in one of those ones they go around Leicester Square and one with all the lights and driven by Albanians or whatever, which will charge you about 100 quid for about 100 yards. Anyway, let's talk to Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, because we're still looking into, and as are the police in Liverpool, what could have possibly happened and what could have gone wrong, and how the terrible events of Bank Holiday Monday could have actually happened, because the front pages this morning have all got a story in some way, shape or form that the driver, the 53-year-old man who's been arrested for driving into people in that Liverpool's parade, was in fact on drugs and should never have been allowed into the area that he was allowed into. Apparently he tailgated behind an ambulance to get in to the street where he ended up being stopped. Mike, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. I'm glad you enjoyed your holiday.
I did, thank you very much indeed. No crime in Dubai, Didn't have to worry about people. People were putting their phones down, leaving them, walking away, putting their headphones down, leaving them, walking away. It's just quite extraordinary to even be in a place where you're not having to watch that all the time, But listen, this story is a terrible story, isn't it? And the police, I think, have got a lot to answer for. Somebody said to me earlier, you might want to ask the question, who was in charge of the barrier that was apparently lifted up to allow the ambulance into the sort of pedestrianised area, if you like. I mean, surely that would be the police's responsibility, wouldn't it?
Well, what the impression I'm getting, Mike, is there's probably a series of rolling barriers as the parade moves around.
Yeah.
And I have little doubt that there was some poorly paid security guard on that barrier. But you would have thought, wouldn't you, that I'm not being funny. It's not like me or you sneaking in. A car sneaking in behind an ambulance does stand out.
Yeah.
So why wasn't that information radioed to the control to say there is a car in the exclusion zone? It's quite extraordinary, really. As a young officer and then as a senior officer, I was involved in the Notting Hill Carnival, which involves months and months of planning to get this right, to control the crowds, to make sure people are safe. And Liverpool FC, it's not like my team, Bolton Wanderers, don't win very much. Liverpool win all the time.
Yeah.
And therefore these sort of events are not unusual in that great city.
Right.
They're used to managing this sort of thing, and that route is probably the same one that Bill Shankly and Bob Paisley went down, when they won major trophies. So I think that's the problem. They've got poorly paid people and a lack of communication.
Yes, because as you say, I mean, if I had tried to drive behind an ambulance in a situation other than that, even just in a normal street situation where there weren't people, hundreds of thousands of people just watching and staring at the parade, you'd be stopped by the police in London doing that, wouldn't you?
Yes, that's right. I mean, I lived in London, you live in London. You're used to these barriers being erected, roads being blocked off, and then the police managing that. Usually, we criticise the police, but it's usually managed very, very well. But this is a catastrophic failing. And I mean, the only thankful thing we can take out of this is that no one died, because many people who have seen the footage, as I have, you probably have, on social media, how anybody did not die in that situation, the way that people have been tossed around by that vehicle. We can only thank the Lord that they're hopefully going to be released from hospital soon.
But we can also only thank the Lord that it wasn't a terrorist attack, that it wasn't somebody who had more malice or forethought. It looks like it was somebody who was off the face, either on drink or drugs, who was possibly, found their way in there by mistake. I don't even know. And who sort of was then frustrated by the fact that they couldn't get anywhere, because you can see clearly there's a point at which the locals are all sort of saying to themselves, how the hell is this guy here? And they start smashing into his car and they break the back window. Even at that point, why were the police not, disabling the car at that point?
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand the situation here, because there are officers all around. They did actually move in very quickly. One of the eyewitnesses the other night was saying, on Monday night, he actually saw officers sprinting down from Lime Street Station to try and control it. And it's just very hard to understand. The first thing will be to deal with this man. He should be charged within the next today, I would imagine. Yeah. They can hold people for a maximum of 96 hours, 4 days, but that's in really extreme circumstances. So I imagine he'll be charged, hopefully by the end of the day. So we'll find out some more facts. But then there'll have to be an inquiry because, as I say, this is not the last time that Liverpool or Everton are going to win a major trophy, and these things are going to happen again. And this is just completely unacceptable to allow the community to be put in such danger.
Exactly right, because they're going to have to say, if this happens again and there is another, parade, we are going to have to be able to guarantee the safety of those people behind the barriers. Because if you can't guarantee the safety of people, they're not going to go.
Well, that's exactly right. There's hundreds of thousands of people there with, men, women and little kids in buggies that were then flung around. If you can't feel safe at a major event which has been organised by a city council and a major police force of the United Kingdom, where can you feel safe?
Right.
That's the tragedy of it.
And the other big issue that's coming out of it as well, Mike, is the very quick naming of the culprit, not the naming, but the identification of the culprit, as far as him being a white British 53-year-old man, which, many people have said was a good thing, but equally has now left the police open to allegations of two-tier policing if they don't do it every time something like this happens.
Of course, and I've already read in The Guardian, this will lead to, as an avid Guardian reader as you are, no doubt, that,
no doubt.
This will lead to sort of race baiting and all that. But the police, in my view, have done the right thing. Yeah. If you remember the tragedy of Nicola Bulley, who went missing in Lancashire, there's all sorts of weird conspiracy theories which filled a void there. And then we had the murders by Axel Ruda-Cabana up in Southport, and the void there, and the sort of misinformation that he was a Welsh choir boy.
Yeah.
That led to this situation. So I think the police did the right thing. However, they're now under pressure to do it every time, because this will lead again to two-tier policing, and it will create a worse situation, because if they simply don't say, then it's obvious to everybody that the person isn't white.
Right.
And I remember reading newspapers in South London where if they didn't describe somebody, they knew exactly who they were.
Yeah.
And that's the police have now done the right thing, but they've set a precedent, and they're going to have to live by that.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Mike, good to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed. Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Lots and lots of messages coming through about all manner of things. We're talking about families this morning. We're talking about cannabis. Sadiq Khan thinks it should be decriminalised. We're talking about Liverpool, of course, as well. And getting early release for prisoners. One from Dan in Kent. Releasing prisoners early won't solve the problem. It's just moving it to a different department, being the probation service. How will they cope? Well, the last time that a lot of these prisoners were released, the probation service said they couldn't cope. They simply didn't have enough people to cover all of those who were being released. And in addition to that, they actually didn't have enough electronic tags to tag them either. So a lot of these characters came out supposedly to be tagged so that they could be kept an eye on, and then they didn't have a tag for them. Shocking. Let's talk to Andrew in Hertfordshire, who wants to talk about whether or not people should be encouraged to have more children. Andrew.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
Crackerjack of a show. The reality of it is if you work, you get child benefit, and therefore, if you have more children, pro rata, you should get more. So they should link the reality of the money to the fact you're working.
Right.
So that way you break the scenario where someone doesn't work but gets more money for children.
Right. Would that not be better then to be the subject of a tax break rather than an actual benefit, so that if you were working and you had kids, you would perhaps pay a lower rate of tax?
That's why you should be in government, because you think logically.
Yeah, because, I mean, why employ loads of people to come up with a benefit when all you could do is say, right, if you're a parent, you don't have to be married, but you're having children, then every time you have a child, you pay slightly less tax. I think that makes sense.
And then you're incentivising people to go to work, because they're putting more money in their pocket because they're working.
Yeah, it's literally putting money in the pockets of working people, Andrew.
Do not do that. You were doing so well.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what he keeps saying he wants to do. That's how you do it, right? Simple. Andrew, good to talk to you. Thank you. One from Shrewsbury and Carl, not Shrewsbury and Carl in Shrewsbury. One of the biggest reasons I think people aren't having children as much is the cost of living is now so high that families can't afford for both parents not to work, coupled with the cost of childcare being so high. So people either have less children and work, or they go on benefits. Yeah, I mean, there's some truth in that. Alison in the Highlands says, great show as always. When my kids were small, I was the main income earner and my husband worked evenings and weekends. Life was busy and we didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. But we weren't in debt either. We received working family tax credit and this was a massive help to us. Maybe this can be looked at again. Yeah, they've had all sorts of things, haven't they, which supposedly were encouraging people to either have more children or to go back to work after having had children. And they don't really seem to know which is the one they want to keep. Carol in Shoreham by Sea. Morning, Mike. Really missed you, but hope you had a great break. Unfortunately, things haven't improved during your absence, and the madness continues. Although Nigel's speech was inspirational and full of hope. Ray, more children. Apparently, Boris has got 9. Have a great day. Yeah, Boris definitely is doing his bit for Queen and country, or King and country, I suppose I should say now. Because at the end of the day, not everybody can afford to have 9 children. I mean, that is ridiculous. And it was brought in, the whole 2-child benefit cap was brought in, as we were saying earlier, because some families, some feckless families, you might say, were having 8 or 9 children, and they were living in council housing. And with every child, they got a bigger house. I remember seeing stories of people living in sort of, £2 million mansions in North London because the local council had to give them a house that was big enough for all of the kids. And nobody was working, everybody was on the dole, and the whole thing was a waste of time. One from Stephen in London. In my experience of working in Westminster, where roads are regularly shut for any event, the mayor places the barriers in the outer areas of the cordon are manned by hired security wombles who have one supervisor in the area who are in contact with the police sergeant, who in turn are in contact with an inspector. So any incursion isn't impossible. The trend now is to react rather than to prevent. And that is the problem, Stephen. You're absolutely right. It should be impossible if you've got a proper security cordon around a proper event. Surely it should be impossible to break or breach that cordon. And as many people have said, including Esther McVey, there should not have been cars parked in the street where the parade was going down. Lift the cars, move them, take them and put them in the pound if necessary. Surely that should have all been done. 0344 499 1000. Coming up in the next hour, Helen Whately MP will hear what she's got to say about all sorts of stuff.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of £70.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. This is, of course, the home of common sense. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. We are at the final hour of the show already. Blimey. Feels I haven't been away. The world has not changed an awful lot in the last few days since I haven't been here. Keir Starmer is still telling one lie after another. Today's coming out and saying that they're going to be helping working people to get themselves some housing. He's going to help them onto the property ladder, apparently, according to him. He's going to make it easier for people to buy houses. Well, how exactly is he going to do that? First, he's got to build them. Hasn't built them yet. Says he's going to give some grants to some private companies to build small numbers of houses, which will be free from red tape. All the other big developers, of course, will still have loads of red tape. We don't know if there are going to be houses built between now and the end of the year. What we do know is that 36,567 people, as you can see on our screens, have come into this country just on the small boats alone under Keir Starmer's watch, and nobody knows exactly where they're living. Some of them are in hotels. Some of them are in single occupancy accommodation. Many of them are in multiple occupancy accommodation as well. So there is a complete and utter free-for-all going out there. There's Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner having a moment of smiliness for a very, very brief period. That was when they used to get along. At the moment, Angela Rayner now is attacking Rachel Reeves every chance she gets, and Rachel Reeves is trying to defend her position, saying that, I didn't really mean to crash the economy, but I'm afraid I did. It's not my fault. It was a £22 billion black hole that did it and then ran away. No. She just borrowed £20 billion in April, this woman. Has she got any idea what she's doing? Answers on a postcard, please. Coming up, Helen Whately is going to be joining us. She's the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. We'll find out from her what she thinks of Nigel Farage's plan for people in Britain to have more children. We'll also talk about Sadiq Khan. He wants to decriminalise cannabis. Let's get a voice note from Ash.
Morning, Mike. Ash from Preston. Every time these people talk about legalising drugs, it's just because the war on drugs, as it was called, has completely failed. You wouldn't believe how much cocaine goes around different pubs, etc. And we all know how common people smoking weed in the street is. It may as well be legalised. I don't agree with it, but it basically is anyway. Great show.
I mean, I guess the difference between legalising and decriminalising it is a little bit subtle. I don't think legalising it is the answer, because the problem is all that happens then is that the drug dealers make still more money because they take advantage of the legalising of it, and that's what happened in America. And suddenly fentanyl became a thing. They didn't worry so much about importing cannabis from Mexico because they could grow it in America, so they started importing something else, which was actually more damaging and more dangerous. It was like morphine, except it was being manufactured in factories where it wasn't being safely produced. So you don't really want any of that, I don't think. But we'll find out what you think through the course of the next hour. Also, police safety fears over jail plan. Keir Starmer's latest plan to release a load of prisoners who have been in jail for some pretty violent offences. Many of them non-recoverable offences, like rape, like sex abuse, like, in fact, aggravated burglary, grievous bodily harm. The Metropolitan Police, MI5 and the National Crime Agency have said it might not be such a good idea to get them out of prison because it might be a net detriment to society. You think? This is Morning Glory. So, morning, Mike. Our once great country is in real trouble, says Don in Chelmsford. We must stop the net zero madness. If we drill for oil and frack, we can turn this around. Plus, we need a competent government and get rid of two-tier Keir. Well, that would be nice. And Winnie in Cornwall says, Mike, absolutely we need to be having more kids. Otherwise, we get even more migration to sustain the numbers. I worked full-time with 3 kids, and during the 6-week summer holiday, every penny of my salary went in childcare. But I wanted my job. Kids were looked after and safe, and it was just for those school holidays. Childcare is expensive, and school holidays are way too many in this day and age now. Well, I mean, that's the thing. And, of course, many people now have children that they can't afford to have, but then they somehow manage to do it. They somehow manage to raise the kids, and most kids are raised pretty well, I think, by most parents. Let's talk to Helen Whately, MP, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Helen, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
We've been talking this morning a lot about Nigel Farage and what he said yesterday about the children of this country. Shall we have a quick look at what he actually said, and I'll ask you what you think of it.
We want to go much, much further to encourage people to have children, to make it easier for them to have children. And that is why I also believe that having a transferable tax allowance between married people is the right thing to do. Now, I know many will say, look, marriage is outdated, most people don't bother to get married anymore, and, you know, I'm hardly standing here in front of you as a religious priest and moralising. I'm not sure my own track record is ever so good on this. And we all lead imperfect lives. But what is true, what is absolutely true, and the evidence is there to prove it, is that where people who are married stay together for the longest period of time, the children that grow up in those environments have the best chance of success in life.
Do you think Britain needs more children, Helen?
And I have 3 children, and I feel very, very lucky to be in that position. We do need to, as a society, be having children. We need that because as people are clearly living longer, which is a good thing, but there are more people who are living when retired, and we need to be able to afford to support the NHS and pensions and all of those things. And in part, some of that is by us having a new generation to work and earn money and help us pay all those bills. However, what I think Nigel Farage got completely wrong is his policy, where particularly he announced yesterday a policy which is to give people more benefits when they have more children. So it wasn't a policy to help everybody having more children. And you read out from a caller a moment ago about how she had struggled with the cost of childcare, for instance, for children, and she was working hard. The policy Nigel Farage announced wouldn't have helped her. In fact, she would have ended up paying more taxes to help other people who are reliant on benefits for their income to pay for those to have more benefits for having more children. Now, that is the wrong policy. It's unfair to taxpayers, and it's also expensive. And actually, at the moment, what we need the government to be doing, what we need opposition parties to be doing, is talking about how we can save money on benefits. The benefits bill is getting out of control, and all we heard from Nigel Farage yesterday was about spending more money on benefits, and he made billions of pounds of unfunded spending commitments. It was complete fantasy economics.
But the point is surely to encourage people who are working, perhaps, to have more children so that, we're not paying for those kids, they're paying for them themselves. I mean, there used to be a system, did there not? And it may be that I'm imagining this, but I'm pretty sure going back a long time, there was a system where there was a married couples allowance, but there was also a tax break for married couples if you had children as well, which you could have as a kind of, more of a reward and incentive rather than an actual, benefit, if you like.
So something, Mike, in what you just said that I completely agree with is supporting, encouraging, enabling people who are working to be able to have children. One of the challenges there is with the cost of childcare. I went through that myself as a working mum. It can be hard. We know that childcare in this country is expensive. It's one of the things that we did when we were in government is introduce more free childcare for people so that you can afford to be able to afford childcare and be able to work, particularly for parents who want to be able to do that and continue to have an income when you have your children. So that's the sort of policy that makes sense so that people can afford to have children. Also critical in this, one of the struggles for people at the moment is with the cost of living. And what we need to make sure is that people, firstly, have jobs, and secondly, that their incomes are going up. The exact opposite to what Labour, for instance, has been doing with their jobs tax, which will be pushing down pay and is driving up unemployment. So some of these are like basics about the economy. And also, again, just come back to the basics about the economy. I'm afraid that's something that Nigel Farage got completely wrong yesterday, and he revealed that he is somebody who does not believe in serious, sensible government and serious answers to the serious problems of our time. Because as I said, he announced the best part of 100 billion spending commitments, and the savings he said against that, they simply don't add up, and it is truly fancy bananas economics.
Although he would say, of course, if he was here, that, well, the reason that we are where we are economically is because of the Tories' mismanagement of the economy for 14 years, where we had the highest income tax in a generation. We had the highest income tax since the Second World War. So, I mean, to be fair, he may have economic illiteracy, but I don't think anybody, either in the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, could claim to be experts, judging by the way things have been going.
Nigel Farage did say that he would be wrong, and if you look at what we did when we took over with David Cameron as Prime Minister, George Osborne as Chancellor, we took over a terrible financial state that Labour had left the country in, and we brought that right under control. We got our finances back on track. We did things like bringing down the deficit. We got ourselves to a position that when we were hit by the pandemic, clearly the worst pandemic in over a century, we were able to support people's livelihoods and support businesses through that time. Yes, it was at a really substantial cost, but we were able to do that. We do have to live with some of the consequences of that. That's why we need a government that is disciplined about the economy, and why we need a government that supports economic growth, exactly the opposite of what Labour is doing. So when we handed over to Labour, they had the fastest growing economy in the G7. Since they've been in power, growth rates have come down, and the forecasts have been revised down because Labour's been busy killing growth with their jobs tax and their taxes on business. So what we need is a sensible approach to the economy that recognises that you have to control public spending, something clearly Farage doesn't really seem to appreciate. You've got to control public spending. We need to bring taxes down affordably and critically support businesses to achieve growth.
Well, since you're having to go at him, I'll play you some more of what he said about the Tories. How about that?
If you want a party to be the opposition party to this Labour government, then it's a Conservative vote that would be a wasted vote. It's a Conservative vote that actually would help keep Labour in power. And that is the absolutely fundamental shift of public perception that has happened after May the 1st. Over 40% of people who voted Conservative at the last election actually wanted to vote Reform, but didn't do it because they thought it would be a wasted vote. And that has been completely and utterly destroyed as an argument. Now, of course, we have a lot to do now that we're in office, and there is a heavy burden of responsibility on the shoulders of many in this room. And our Doge unit has now been set up. You'll be hearing much more about that. We firmly established which flags we will and won't fly from Council Hall, something that is very popular with the public. And we are already beginning to discover excessive wastes of money in local government.
And that will be a proof in the pudding, will it not? If Reform are able to run a few councils reasonably well, they become a more credible party nationally, don't they?
One of the things that I reflect from what Nigel Farage said yesterday is that shows more than ever why we need the Conservative Party and the sort of offer and principles that the Conservative Party bring. Reform doesn't seem to have a set of principles. You never know which way they're going to turn next. They're probably just going to say whatever they think is going to be popular. But we are the only party that clearly has a set of principles to do with supporting people to take personal responsibility, freedom, a smaller state that does a better job, living within our means as a country, absolutely crucial. These are things on which we base our policies and which are clearly strongly held principles, while the other parties, whether it's Labour, whether it's Lib Dems, whether it's Reform, they're all offering big state solutions that as a country we can't afford, and which inevitably mean higher taxes. That can't be, when it comes to it, what people will want.
No, I don't think people do want higher taxes. That's why they voted in Labour, thinking that taxes would go down, but they got that wrong. I mean, the state also did get bigger under the Tory government over the last 14 years. More civil servants, more quangos, you know, more big government interference in people's lives, and that's why a lot of Conservatives ended up voting for Reform, because they think conservatism has kind of died a death and it's been abandoned by the Conservative Party.
We're doing in our time in opposition, and Kemi Badenoch is a leader on this, is making sure we reflect on the lessons that we learned and the message we got from the electorate, who are clearly very unhappy with us at the last election. I think one of the consequences of the pandemic is it did mean that government reached more into people's lives, and the state did become a solution to more things. You know, lots of people are looking to the state for guidance on how to cope with that situation. Whatever you think about the way that all played out, we need to make sure we reflect on that and we double down, and we're very clear about our principles as a party on which our policies flow from. And one of those is that we fundamentally believe in personal responsibility and freedom in a smaller state which does things better, in leaving more money in people's pockets rather than taking it as taxes, which we know isn't what people want. It's also not good for businesses who need to be able to provide a return and grow. Those are really clear principles, and as I said, the ones that Nigel Farage, from what we heard yesterday, clearly doesn't hold. He had fantasy economics in his announcements, and the one thing he announced on benefits was not to bring down the benefits bill, but actually to increase spending on benefits.
As a matter of principle, do you think Lucy Connolly should be released from prison?
I think this is a difficult one, and I don't want to stray into
Why is it difficult?
Grounds beyond
Why is it difficult?
ones that one politician should stray on. I say But what I do think is I'm alarmed by seeing somebody who has put a tweet on social media having a long prison sentence, when on the other hand, what we're seeing Labour do is early release of some seriously violent criminals. So that's a thing which I think should be looked into, is what's going on there, where you've
surely if
you've
they're
got
going to
somebody
release,
with a long sentence
if
for
they're
doing
going to
a tweet.
surely if they're going to release a load of prisoners, she should be amongst them, shouldn't she?
So I'm just, as for me as Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, the area I spend time on is welfare. So that would be a question for.
Well, you've just been talking to me about your principles. Yeah, but you've been just talking to me about your principles. So surely you must have principles about law and order. Do you not think if he's if Labour government is releasing, tens of thousands of prisoners, shouldn't she be amongst them?
Don't think, no, you could then go from Lucy to another person. I'm not going to sit here and say what the right sentencing and release policy is. So I think it's, as you say, let's stick with the principles. And for instance, on principles,
as a principle, wouldn't you release her?
Well, I'd say, no, that's a very specific personal incident. That's not a general principle. You need to have general principles. So general principles, for instance, being tough on crime.
Well, general principles apply to individuals as well. If you're going to talk to me in generalities, that's fine. But nobody's going to believe a word you say when you can't answer a straightforward question.
I am going to talk in terms of general principles. I'm not somebody who's looked into all the circumstances of any individuals.
Well, you know the circumstances of Lucy Connolly. You've just described them to me. You know exactly what the circumstances are. She's already served about 11 months of a prison sentence, which is due to last for 31 months. She may well be released in August when she's served 40% of her time. All I'm saying is, surely logically, if your principle is about freedom, which is what you said was one of your principles, then surely she should be free when so many other people are being freed who have committed far more serious crimes. Isn't that a good principle?
Exactly, that's repeated the point which I was indeed making, which is, it looks like something odd and therefore, wrong is happening, where you've got people who are being released early who've been violent offenders, particularly, for instance, violent domestic abusers that Labour accidentally released early. On the other hand, you've got Lucy Connolly serving this very long sentence for a tweet. And it looks like there is something wrong going on there. That is what I'm very happy to say on this programme. That is my reflection on the situation.
OK, well, you nearly got there. I think it sounds like you want her to be released. Thank you very much indeed. Helen Whately, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. She'd do a lot better if she just said yes, wouldn't she? People would actually understand it. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Hi Mike, this is Mark from Essex. I have to be careful what language I use, because I absolutely hate Sadiq Khan. The man's ruining London. With roads like the Embankment and Regent Street being reduced to one lane, you've got open top buses running around London with about 6 people on board. You've got so many coaches and novelty tours that are going around London, and yet he's going to put up congestion charge yet again. He's making us go through Blackwall Tunnel and pay for a tunnel that was built in 1967. How is he getting away with this stuff?
I know. I don't know how he's getting away with he's right. I love the... I'm going to be careful what I say about Sadiq Khan. I hate him. I know, it's just ridiculous. Kath in Oxfordshire says, my understanding is that child benefit was universally introduced to give mothers a small degree of financial independence from those fathers who deliberately withheld their wages, in an era where women earned far, far less than men, if they worked at all. While times have changed in many ways, the principle of a mother being able to directly provide for her child remains. Don't talk about principles, Kath. You might get Helen Whately excited. Here's one from Kurt, who says, hi, Mike, great show. If Nigel wants more people to get married from a man's point of view, they need to look at divorce and divorce settlements. Working men work their best years, get married, some have kids, get a house, then when the marriage breaks down, they get divorced. 90% of the time, the men lose everything. Many men are pragmatic and look at these proposed tax breaks, but it doesn't balance up compared to what they stand to lose in a divorce. So there's so many strings to this one. There's so many reasons why some people don't want to have kids, why some people have more kids, why some people don't have any kids. It's not something you can solve, I don't think, very straightforwardly with either a benefit or some kind of incentive. But it's got to be looked at. Has to be. Coming up, yobbos who terrorise people on e-bikes and on scooters and things like that. Apparently, Starmer's going to crush them. Crush the scooters. Do you think he will, really? Has he got a big, crusher? I've got a crusher. Crush them. 22 minutes past 9.
I don't know whether it'll be a game changer, Julia, but it is the right decision. From time to time, we've done about 8 or 9 of these. We do opinion panel surveys amongst Popcorn supporters, and more than 85% of our supporters believe that the Conservatives should pledge to leave the ECHR and scrap the Human Rights Act. Yeah. And it's a pretty good barometer for Conservative grassroots opinion. So it certainly will be a popular move within the party.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. Edward says, how can Starmer say he's helping people get on the housing ladder, having reinstated stamp duty for most buyers, adding thousands up front for buying a house? Sir Keir, the deluded Prime Minister. That's true, actually. I was talking to somebody the other day. The stamp duty rises are absolutely unbelievable. One from Joy in Suffolk. Mike, the prison situation isn't logical. Letting out violent offenders to make space for middle-aged mums who have an opinion on what's happening in our country. This proves Lucy is a political prisoner. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, I don't understand why so many politicians have got an issue actually saying, yeah, I think we should let her out. What's wrong with that? Colin in Sussex, I went to a large sporting event a couple of weeks ago and saw somebody being challenged about the smoke from the cigarette they were having outside. The individual smoking illegal drugs, however, continued with impunity. Is this a product of fear, or has it become more socially acceptable to take drugs rather than to smoke tobacco? I think that's true. Yeah, because, I mean, you try and light a cigarette up somewhere and people will stare at you and be stern about what you're doing. Don't smoke here. But if you've got a joint, no doubt, maybe it's because people don't want to challenge you. I've never seen anybody being challenged about smoking cannabis at all. Let's talk to Thomas Godfrey, though, from The Sun, because a great piece in the paper this morning from Jack Elsom. Police are set to get powers to crush troublemakers' off-road bikes, e-scooters and cars within 48 hours of seizing them. Well, I wonder how hard this is going to be. It turns out the Home Office has launched a consultation on the proposals to combat the antisocial and reckless riding and driving, which blights many communities. Thomas, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, there's probably nobody listening to this who hasn't seen or had experienced some form of sort of yobbery around all this, whether it's kids on bikes doing wheelies, in gangs of 10 or 15, whether it's scooters making a lot of noise, or whether it's the electric versions of people just going really fast and nicking stuff. I mean, there's a lot of this kind of level of crime, isn't there?
There is, and there's many people who will have had their phones snatched off them simply walking through the street by someone on one of these bikes. I mean, this morning we've heard on the radio and in the papers that the police want more funding. They say they don't have enough money to carry out some of the reforms that are necessary for the continuing work of the police force. However, they're being given more work in that they will now have to potentially crush and dispose of these sort of e-bikes that many of them bought legally, of course, e-bikes and scooters within 48 hours. And the idea behind it, the Home Office say, is that it stops the revolving door policy where currently you have 2 weeks to claim back something that's been seized from you by the police. And if that's done in 48 hours, well, it means that criminals have a far lower chance of getting their stuff back. That's the idea behind it. But whether there's actually the level of coordination between the police, local council and the Home Office to make it work, we'll have to see if it works in practice.
I mean, a lot of these e-scooters that we can see people riding on there are illegal anyway, aren't they? I mean, the ones that you can hire are okay, but you're not supposed to be able to buy a private e-scooter and ride it on a public highway.
No, well, the number of times I see them zipping across Westminster Bridge, other parts of central London, and actually a lot of people use the pavement. I mean, I grew up in Bournemouth, a place where they have one of these pilot schemes for e-scooters. Went to university in Oxford where they have the same, and in London there isn't really one of those schemes, but nevertheless there's even more of them here, and many times I've been either nearly hit or seen other people nearly come into contact with them or have things swiped off them. So they are a real danger to people on the streets, and actually the more of them that are crushed, probably the safer the streets will be.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so how likely is this going to happen? Because, I mean, he loves to smash and grab things, doesn't he, old Keir Starmer? He was going to smash the gangs, the smuggling gangs. He was going to crush the fly-tipping vans as well. And now they're going to try and crush these things. And he's got a bit of an obsession about crushing stuff, but he hasn't crushed much, really, up to now.
No, and as with seemingly all of these government policies, they have to go through some convoluted consultancy phase first. So there's no action immediately, and those consultations can take months at a time, basically, to work out whether the police can actually do it, whether it's something that will decrease the rate of crime. But as with all these criminals, and this policy would apply to cars as well, as with all these policies, criminals often have means of simply replacing these things, even if they get taken off them. And so is it actually addressing the root of the problem? Is it actually going to halt criminality? Well, maybe if it's just one person with one e-scooter riding around snatching phones and wallets, but as part of an organised gang, then those people have the resources simply to just replace it.
Yeah. And I mean, who's making all the money out of these things? Because I mean, you'd have to assume that some of them are stolen as well. Some of these off-road bikes, some of the cars, I guess, that are involved in crime as well. A lot of that stuff is actually stolen. So these guys don't even own them anyway, do they?
No, exactly. And also the rate at which car thefts and bike thefts are solved is pitifully low. The police seemingly only ever recover, I think, about a third of cars that get stolen. They identify a suspect in far fewer cases, and actually the number of people who are prosecuted for stealing cars, well, you have to actually be a pretty bad car thief to get caught and banged up.
Yeah.
So in many of these cases, and it is a lot of organised gangs, it's a big supply chain where a lot of this stuff, even if it gets crushed, well, it won't be something they've bought anyway.
Right.
So actually, there's no financial loss to them.
No, of course. And we've got in the Times this morning 6 different police chiefs, management heads telling us, or telling Keir Starmer, we haven't really got the money to do any of the things that you want to do. The 13,000 extra police, the cutting down by half of knife crime, the cutting down by half of crime against women and girls. Where are they going to find the resources for this?
Well, they're not. Many pledges have been made by the government, and they can't all be fulfilled. It seems there just isn't the money to do so, and so it becomes a case of, well, who can we not fund? Is it the winter fuel allowance reversal? Is it the police? Is it the Border Security Command? Which one of those pledges has to be sacrificed? And it seems that, despite the police making this plea across the radio and newspapers this morning, that they may not get all of the funding they need. Mark Rowley's been making the point for a while, actually, that inflation means the amount they have in their budget has actually decreased in real terms, whereas the population of London and other cities around the UK has dramatically increased. If the Met was to have the same resources to combat crime now as it did 10 years ago, it would need an extra £1 billion in funding. Now, where is anyone going to find £1 billion? Well, nowhere, it seems, at the moment. And so that's why their call is so important. But it looks as if it may fall on deaf ears in terms of the police getting the full amount of funding they've requested, which is why they're kicking up such a fuss.
Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Thomas Godfrey, thank you very much indeed. From The Sun, the story in the paper today on page 8 by Jack Elsom. Policing Minister Dame Diana Johnson has highlighted dangerous street racing and off-road bikes tearing through parks. And of course, I'm sure anybody listening to this would have seen an example of this at some point. So they're launching a consultation on proposals to combat the antisocial and reckless riding and driving, blighting many communities. Well, we'll see how that consultation goes. There's only about another 50,000 consultations going on at the moment. Natasha says, what I and many want to know is how reform are going to deal with the civil service blob, especially if they have a lot of inexperienced MPs. They can promise all they want, but much of the civil service will hate reform and will work against them. Well, they did it against the Tories, but I guess the difference is the Tories may not quite have the mettle that Reform will have, because Reform have actually got people in their organisation who know how to manage things. They haven't just worked in the public sector all their lives. Steve says our justice system is just plain wrong. Convicts should serve at least the minimum sentence set by judges, and time should be added on for bad behaviour. That way the very worst prisoners would stay inside. As a taxpayer, I'm happy to keep our streets safe if it means paying more. Steve, never say that. Never say I'm happy to pay more taxes, because in the end they will take your taxes and they will do nothing with them. Nothing more than they have done already. And on the subject of King Charles, Susan says, why can't King Charles do more about the sovereignty of our country? He doesn't like Canada being part of the USA, but says nothing about Starmer putting us under the control of the EU. That's a very good point. And one from Brian, who says, Mike, regarding the increasing food prices, didn't Starmer say at a little shop that he will bring food prices down? He did, and he also came with a little first smile, and he said, there. And I spoke to the staff in the shop, and, the thing that they were most excited about was the e-gates. Have a look.
We're in Lidl because the deal that we struck yesterday will mean lower prices in our supermarket shelves like this, and that is really good news for customers of Lidl, for the staff of Lidl, and for all of those involved in food and agriculture. And so there's real buzz. I've just been with the staff. They're very pleased because they know that for their customers, for their families, it makes a real difference. I have to say, when I was with the staff, they were equally excited about the e-gates and being able to go on their holidays, which they've obviously already planned, and not be in the horrendously long queues. So on both fronts, lower prices in places like Lidl and the e-gates so they can go on holiday more quickly. The staff here are very pleased to see the work on the deal that we did yesterday.
Yeah, I haven't seen people that excited in Lidl's for a long time. Since Keir Starmer mentioned the e-gates to them. Have you got anything in the centre aisle? E-gates. You buy some e-gates and you put them in your house and leave them open, close them. You can have people charge people to come in. No, the e-gates are complete irrelevance, right? That doesn't matter. And also, prices are not going down, they're going up. Apart from that, everything's fine. Let's get a voice note from Elle.
My daughter and son-in-law have been together 8 years now. They couldn't afford to have a child. I've had to give up work. I've retired early so I can look after the child for them, or there would not be a child. They just said, well, we can't afford it. They got private rent of £1,200. The childcare cost was £1,400, and you have all your other expenses on top of that. She's got student debt from uni. It would have been impossible. And I said, well, I'll look after her. It means I've got to stop working. I don't claim any benefits. I've just literally cashed in my pensions early. I think it's really unfair if people are on the social that they get more. When I was younger, I had a friend who got about £1,300 a month when my husband was only earning £1,100 for 4 of us. And there was only her and her 2 children getting £200 a month more for being on the benefits.
Yeah, it's always been a bad system, absolutely always. Paul in Belfast says the Tories are hopeless in their inability to condemn the sentencing of Lucy Connolly. Pathetic. Kevin in Stafford says having Tory mouthpieces on talk is about as useful as having spokespersons on from Plaid Cymru, the Lib Dems, or the monster raving loony party. Well, listen, they want to keep coming up and talking to us. We'll talk to them in the same way that we talk to Labour any time, you know. The few and far between health ministers or the occasional ministers or the occasional secretary of states, we'll have them all. It's what we do. It's the home of common sense, the home of free speech. You want to come and talk to us, but don't expect us to let you away with not getting asked the odd difficult question. It's quite simple. 9:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is, of course, the home of common sense, the world headquarters, indeed. Julie Hartley-Brewer here just before 10 o'clock to take you through until 1. Lots going on. With breaking news this morning, water regulator Ofwat has fined Thames Water almost £123 million following 2 investigations, the largest ever fine from the regulator. Of course, no doubt, Thames Water will just charge that back to the customers. People say to me that their water bills have gone up by 20, 30, 40, even 50%. So please don't tell me that inflation is only running at 3.5%, because it clearly isn't. We're going to talk now to Francis Hall, public law barrister. Story yesterday that the Free Speech Union were able to brag about. They said this: we're delighted the Bar Standards Board has dropped its proposal to impose a duty on barristers to promote, in their words, equality, diversity and inclusion. The Free Speech Union raised concerns, but they weren't the only people that did raise concerns. But they commissioned a 23-page legal opinion from leading public law barristers. And so more good news for those of us who think that the whole DEI propaganda campaign is on its last legs. Let's hope it is. Francis, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
Good to speak to you. I think people have been increasingly concerned at the creeping leftism, if you like, of the judiciary in this country. You know, there was a time, and I'm not saying it was necessarily better, when, you know, the old judges had to be reminded who, you know, George Michael actually was, because they didn't know very much about popular music. There was a time when, you know, they were more likely to be in the newspapers because of, you know, some perhaps nefarious activities they got up to in a basement in Soho. Whereas now they all seem to be straight out of, you know, some kind of United Nations school of left-wing maniacs. And it's hard to find barristers these days who are not left-wing.
I don't know. I think perhaps barristers specialising in public law who are more likely to comment on political matters might be more likely to be left-wing. Do you want to talk about the proposal, Mike?
Yes, the Bar Standards Board had a proposal, which is kind of what leads me to ask that question, because the Bar Standards Board, I presume, is a regulatory body which regulates all barristers, but it wanted there to be a special promotion for equity or equality, diversity and inclusion.
So first of all, the Bar Standards Board was set up relatively recently as an independent body which has a majority of lay members, i.e. non-barristers and judges. The Bar Council is technically still legally responsible for regulation of barristers, but it delegates it to the BSB. The Bar Council, for what it is worth, has been opposed to this proposal throughout, and it comes from the BSB, and I think it comes because this is becoming a more general requirement in many areas. I think I agree with you wrongly, including in the solicitors' profession. And the current situation is because, quite apart from anything else, barristers have to follow the law in giving legal advice or doing anything else, that they cannot discriminate. And that is set out, cannot discriminate on the basis of protected characteristics. That's the Equality Act. Essentially, you give the same person a service to everyone, regardless of their sex, their race, whatever else it might be. And that's absolutely right. But this duty is a positive duty to promote equality, diversity and inclusion, which has a definition that is nowhere in law and is frankly a bit nebulous as to what that means. And the particular difficulty there with that particular duty that was proposed is it's a positive duty. Now, there are some positive duties that barristers have obviously, such as to prepare for their cases, such as to work diligently for their client, but they're pretty unusual. Generally speaking, the duties are negative duties. So the duty not to discriminate is a classic one, and that's the appropriate way in which professions should be regulated, not to be negligent, to perform. Now, obviously, that means performing a reasonable professional service. So in a sense, it's positive, but generally speaking, negative. This one means that if you don't do particular things, if you don't actively promote this, whatever that might mean, then you're somehow in breach of your duties. So you might think that you're going to do a profession and you represent your clients. You do as much or as little as you wish. We're self-employed, so you can do as much as little or as little as you wish work. But obviously all the work you do must be done conscientiously and well, and that's it. And providing you don't discriminate, that's fine. You shouldn't have those sort of positive duties. So that's one element, but there's an even worse element, which is a duty to promote outcomes that is measurable by means of the diversity of the population. Now, as Tom Jason Koppel and Tom Cross, KCKC, put in that opinion, which is excellent and I recommend, that potentially imposes a duty on chambers to improve, in the words of the BSB proposal, measurable outcomes, i.e. potentially, if you aren't increasing the proportion of ethnic minorities or women or whatever it might be in your chambers, you're in breach of that. Well, it may well be that they're simply not applying to your chambers, or you're a small chambers and therefore you can't possibly have a measurable, diverse outcome of people, because you're dependent upon who goes into that profession and who wants to go to chase. We're not like huge organisations where you would expect to have some kind of diversity measurable by the population simply because of the great numbers of employees. It's a totally different profession.
No, of course. I mean, the other thing that's interesting in what the Free Speech Union had to say is that they also regarded this proposal as potentially having what they call a chilling effect on representation for clients with dissenting views, i.e. if people were coming to a barrister who was involved in this promotion of equality, diversity and inclusion, who was perhaps considered to be right-wing, or who might be considered to be someone who didn't think anything of those kinds of promotions, that they might not be fairly represented, or they may not be represented at all.
And indeed, you might have an employment tribunal case, or a case, a disciplinary regulatory body case, where somebody is being prosecuted or not prosecuted, but somebody's being dismissed or being disciplined for exposing those views, or a criminal case where they're prosecuted under various speech, effectively speech laws, such as Section 5 of the Public Order Act. Now, the reality is that if you didn't represent that client, if you didn't accept those instructions, if you were willing, if you were able to do the work and there was a reasonable fee for the work, that's the cab rank principle. You have an obligation to do that irrespective of the views or the opinions of the individual, and to put their case forward conscientiously. You'd have a duty to do that still, which just shows that this duty, obviously not now being imposed, fortunately, is completely in conflict with the ethics and the ethos of the bar, as well as the ethics and the ethos of free speech. But the bar is there to ensure that everyone has the right to a representative of their choice, if they are able to provide, if they are able to source that representative, and that representative's available. That's a very important part of what this profession is about, and it feeds into free speech, because you can't be more free, and you should never be more free than when you're in court advocating on behalf of your clients. You should never be clipped or culled or have any kind of regulatory pressure over you when you're doing that, providing, of course, you don't mislead the court and you keep to the acceptable standards of behaviour. That's essential.
Absolutely. And just one final, just a sort of addendum to all of that. I see from the front page of the Telegraph today, Sir Keir Starmer has been dragged into a legal battle over the burning of the Quran. Because it turns out that the lawyers will use a case successfully brought by Sir Keir more than 20 years ago, presumably when he was a human rights lawyer, in defence of Hamet Koskan, who is up before the Beak today, Westminster Magistrates Court, for behaviour likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. So that'll be kind of interesting if Keir Starmer's previous victory is a factor in this guy getting off.
Yeah, very interesting, but it's very concerning because in fact, my view is that that offence, Section 5 of the Public Order Act, which was introduced by the Thatcher government in the 1980s, is wrong and should be repealed. Causing somebody who may be doing behaviour that might cause somebody harassment, alarm or distress, in my view, does not pass the criminal threshold at all. And people need to be robust, and it's particularly important in terms of the expression of free speech. Now, the courts have have reduced the effect of that section by saying that you have to respect Article 10, you have to respect free speech rights, and you have to respect Article 9, the right to a conscience and to manifest your religious and your beliefs, and that's important. But what's particularly important is when you're expressing your religious beliefs. Now, I can see that there may be circumstances where you are likely to cause public disorder and violence by, say, burning the Quran. And there may be circumstances, I don't rule out that there may be circumstances that might be a criminal offence. But in principle, exhibiting your religious views, even your religious hostility and your hostility for other religions, is an essential right. And it's very important it's respected. And it's very dangerous when we see members of the House of Commons talking about protections needed for Abrahamic religions, by which they probably mean one Abrahamic religion in particular. But in any event, Keir Starmer, when that question was asked by one of his backbenchers, did not say anything about the fact that we don't have a blasphemy law in this country. And if you come to this country and you live in this country, of whatever religion, you have to expect that your religion will be denigrated, will be ridiculed. We are not in the 16th or the 17th century anymore.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great to see you. Francis, thank you very much indeed. Francis Hall, public law barrister there. Let's get a voice note from Peter on having children.
Morning, Mike. I just want to comment on this, us not having enough kids. I think there's one particular reason, and a very, very important reason why people are not having any more kids, and particularly men, and that's the divorce proceedings in the court. A man gets absolutely hammered, and his life's finished once you end up divorced. If you have kids, if you don't have kids, you both walk away with clean feet. With kids, the man's life is destroyed. We need the divorce system reforming dramatically. Then you might see the child rate go up. Thanks, Mike. Great show.
No problem at all, Peter. Thank you very much indeed. Interesting point, also made by a couple of other people. Elsa says this: it makes my blood boil to hear King Charles speaking at the Canadian Parliament. It was a completely political signal and unnecessary. He should be more concerned about what's going on in the UK. Given his health problems, as we're told, why is he interfering in the affairs of another country? Glad you enjoyed Dubai. I lived there from 1978 to 1984. Went back twice. Don't think I'd recognise it now. No, you wouldn't. It's absolutely giant now. Absolutely incredible. Paul from Wiltshire says, reference to the legalisation of cannabis in London and the increase in the congestion charge. Will people smoking cannabis now be charged for smoking inside the congestion charge, or you, Les? It's a good question. Listen, if Sadiq Khan can find a way of charging you for doing anything, he'll be doing it. As long as it's not, of course, anything to do with the things that he likes, in which case he doesn't charge you for that at all. Coming up, we're going to hear from more of you. We've got another 10 minutes to go. This is Morning Glory.
I mean, the jokes that were made in the production offices around the BBC and the producers that the BBC put me in touch with were, we can break your legs for you, are you sure you're not gay, fancy a kiss, those kinds of things. They were jokes, and, you know, I found them funny, to be fair. I've got a sense of humour. But this is not even a secret back then. Now, this was 2018. Now, I would say that was the peak of this. Yeah. Now, I don't know if it's necessarily quite the same. It's now just an accepted fact, whereas back in 2018, it was a real push.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to just about 10 minutes to 10. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, of course. Stuart says, Prince Charles gave a speech directed at Trump regarding Canada's territory and should do the same to Starmer about the Chagos territory giveaway as well. And one here from Neil. He says, Mike, I agree with you on many things, but I'm sorry to say I disagree with you on your criticism of King Charles. Firstly, you stated that the Queen would not have been so political, but to be fair, she never had to face a neighbouring country wanting to make it part of its country. Secondly, Charles is not only head of the Commonwealth, but also King of Canada. So if he can't defend the rights of the Canadian people, who can? Well, I think, as it was pointed out by Rupert Bell, he didn't actually defend the rights of the Canadian people as one of them. He defended the rights of the Canadian people who he referred to in the third person. So, yeah, he is head of the Commonwealth, but he was quite sort of, shall we say, circumspect about joining hands entirely with the Canadian government. He said the government, as Rupert said, rather than my government. And so I think also the idea that in some ways a neighbouring country wants to make it part of its country, I mean, that is just the Donald Trump hyperbole. He's not trying to make Canada part of America. He's saying that he's going to, you know, make them put their house in order is effectively what he's saying. And they need him to, because as you saw from Mark Carney's expression when he was sat in the Oval Office, he didn't have anything to say to Donald Trump. He just knew that he was being bossed, and he just had to say that he would take his medicine and get on with it. So all of the nonsense and noise that he made when he was up in Ottawa made nothing as soon as he got to Washington. Let's talk to Michael in Chesterfield about children. Michael, very good morning to you.
Hello, good morning, Mike.
What do you want to say?
Going back a little while to when you were talking about child benefit caps. A few months ago on GB News, I saw an interview with a woman who had 11 kids.
Yeah.
She looked to be sort of early 30s.
Yeah.
And the interviewer asked her if she was happy with that situation, just spreading her... Well, she didn't say happy spreading her legs for everybody in the community, but if you've got 11 kids and no husband, I guess that's what it is. And she said she was perfectly happy, 11 kids. And I'm appalled that the taxpayer has to foot the bill for all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I can understand it to a degree if people are at work and you give them an extra child benefit, maybe for 3 kids. But the country is being absolutely ravaged by people on benefits.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? You know, the benefit system is supposed to help people. It's not supposed to provide you with a way of life, is it?
No, exactly. And until somebody is absolutely determined to deal with it, then the situation is going to get worse.
Yeah.
And as for Farage, it's the most stupid, if it is a policy, it's the most stupid statement he's made in a long, long time. Because most sensible people, I think like me, reward decent people rather than people having 6 and 7 kids.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a bit like, I said it earlier, it's a bit like the immigration conversation. You know, we don't mind immigration. You just want the right kind of immigration, people who are going to come in to this country and you know, compete for jobs and make sure that they actually add something to the general good, as opposed to coming into this country and scrounging.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone does any calculations about the money that we spend on what I would call filth and vermin. I'm not calling this woman filth and vermin, but if you had the money that we spend on murderers, paedophiles, people on benefits,
it's
illegal immigrants in hotels, if you add all that lot up, and people, decent people, are paying taxes for it. And it always amuses me with all the giveaways that we have for this, that and everything. An advert I see occasionally on TV, charity money, people ask to donate a few quid for guide dogs for the blind.
Yeah.
And if we can't do that as a sort of national freebie, then God help us.
I know. It's right. Very true. Michael, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. His view on people on benefits having free money to have more children. Absolutely right. It shouldn't be a thing. It should not be possible. You know, there should not be government encouragement for that kind of behaviour, surely. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. Personally, I'm really not sure that this welfare policy of child support from Farage and Reform is going to be a vote winner with Reform supporters or even with would-be Reform supporters who are currently on the Conservative side of things. We want a smaller welfare state, not a bigger one. And what I want to hear from Reform is how they're going to reduce the foreign aid budget, how they're going to reduce spending, how they're going to stop people with large families from foreign countries who don't have birth control. I want to hear from them how they stop these people coming to our country, taking advantage of the NHS, free dental care and everything else, basically taking advantage of the British taxpayer. This isn't going to help that.
Yeah, Mark, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think people now, currently in the state that this government is in, and the state that this economy is in, and the state this country is in, want a party that's going to put their prices up and their taxes up in order to pay for more children being had by other people. I think that's not right. I think that's probably not the way to go. Dave in South Gloucestershire says this, regarding Nigel Farage, it's clear that the only weapons both Labour and the Conservatives have to counter the rise of Reform UK are derision and sneering insults. Apart from the common sense policies, understanding of the needs of the British people and business, and obvious love of country, traditions, principles and our way of life, Nigel has one huge weapon that the rest, including the Lib Dems and the Greens, have lost and will not regain, and that is trust. Both major parties abused the trust of the British electorate through empty promises, weakness, hypocrisy and lies, and I'm certain Nigel Farage is intelligent and wise enough not to make the same mistakes. I think he is. I think he absolutely is. Talking about cannabis, Vic says this, morning Mike, I have prescription cannabis. I have to pay 50 quid every 3 months for my consultation. I get 2 times oils and I also flowers, which I have to vape. If I smoke it and get caught, I get it taken away. I get free NHS prescriptions due to my chronic health conditions, mainly epilepsy. All my medications are free, however, not my cannabis, which is the only medicine that helps my chronic pain in my hip and the rest of my body. I'm sorry, but there was a bit of misinformation there. No one can say one thing causes psychosis. It's ludicrous. It may heighten underlying mental health issues, but it doesn't cause it. Sorry, rant over. says Vic. Yeah, well, listen, it's Sadiq Khan who says that he believes that it should really be for the government, or perhaps for the Mayor of London. He can't actually do it for himself, but he wants to have an honest and transparent conversation about whether or not we should decriminalise, at the very least, cannabis, which would be nice to, if he was used to having, honest and transparent conversations. I mean, let's have an honest and transparent conversation about the clean air that he proposes to create over the various congestion zone charges, and let's have an honest and transparent argument and conversation about why he's putting up the congestion charge. Indeed, let's have an honest and transparent conversation about whether there are any Muslim rape gangs in London, which he didn't want to seem to talk about the last time he was asked by somebody, as far as I remember. Anyway, there we are. Julie Hartley-Pierce here. Very good morning.
Very good morning. Welcome back to you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Did you have a good time?
I had a wonderful time. Had a fantastic time.
A bit more reliable weather in Dubai.
Very reliable. Yeah, I came out this morning. I thought, I'd forgotten to check if it was raining, because it was raining when I came out this morning, because it didn't seem to rain much there, really. You just go out and you go,
the sand.
It's another 45-degree day then. Head to the umbrella.
I couldn't live in it. But anyway.
You get used to it. It's amazing how much you get used to it. I mean, on the last day, I walked out, I was like, nothing at all.
I mean, you think that every day. That's what we like about the rain here. I want to talk about the cannabis thing, because again, if he's so obsessed with air pollution.
Yeah.
Genuinely, most of the air pollution is actually in people's homes.
Yeah.
And it's things like, I mean, the worst air pollution you get is wandering around smelling everyone's cannabis.
Yeah, there's so much of it in London, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So much of it. I mean, it's already pretty much decriminalised anyway, isn't it?
But also, it's the fact that the big issue is, of course, it's because it's damaging relations between the police and some ethnic minorities. It's like, well,